someone inadvertently hit the button underneath, so I just
Okay.
noticed it.
Oh, the power strip.
Yeah, one of them's there.
Yeah. Okay.
The live stream's back up.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt DeFed. All right. We thank you all for bearing with us. We are back in public session now, and I will turn it over to Dr. Gonzalez for his report.
Thank you. Just want to make sure there we go. Before we go into the presentations, earlier this evening I sent out a community update to our staff and families regarding the governor's recent announcement regarding the March 7th lifting of his mask mandate in schools. So for those in attendance or may be watching who may not have received or read the update, I'll read the correspondence as part of the administrative report this evening before our presentations on the strong assessment results and our budget overview. Dear Westfield Public Schools community, as many of you know, Governor Murphy announced yesterday that masks and face coverings will no longer be state mandated for students, staff, or visitors in schools, effective March 7th. The governor has left it to the discretion of individual school districts to decide what is best for their school communities. In the days ahead, the New Jersey Department of Health will provide additional guidance for schools to determine the impact, if any, on social distancing, contact tracing, and other mitigation factors. The specific information will help us inform any possible changes to the instructional and operational structures of our schools. While we await the NJDOH guidance, I will continue to maintain regular and open communication with our Westfield Regional Health Department and district physician to monitor our local conditions over the next month. We all remain cautiously optimistic that the COVID activity in our schools will continue to decrease and our vaccination rate for eligible students will continue to rise, thus making masks optional a reality by March 7th, barring any unforeseen setback. Please note that such a change may be adjusted in the future if conditions warrant at the classroom, grade, school, or district levels. We will continue to share information from our health professionals about upcoming events, including free pediatric COVID vaccine clinics for 5 to 11-year-olds this Thursday, February 10th, from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Cassano Community Center at 314 Chestnut Street in Roselle Park on Saturday, February 26th, from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Westfield Memorial Library. Residents can also visit the Westfield Regional Health Department website at www.westfieldnj.gov/health for a full listing of clinics, or they could call 908-789-4070, extension 4075 to schedule an appointment. I'm eager to return a sense of normalcy to our schools as soon and as safely as possible. However, we've come too far to rush this. So for the next 4 weeks, we will work diligently to ensure that any adjustments to our existing COVID protocols and mitigation strategies are appropriate to current conditions. Thank you for your continued patience, understanding, and support as we work together to emerge from this public health emergency stronger and safer. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to move on for our reports this evening, beginning with the presentation of our strong assessment, Start Strong assessment results from the fall of 2021, presented by Dr. Paul Pinero, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, along with members of our supervisory staff, Liz Riley, Elizabeth D'Alessandro, and Tom Patterson, who will all be joining in the presentation. Dr. Pinero?
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. So good evening. Tonight I think there's going to be a lot of numbers coming at you of the two reports. So we'll start out with our report on the Start Strong assessments. And as Dr. Gonzalez said, we're joined by our K-12 science supervisor, Tom Patterson, from right to left, and Liz D'Alessandro's K-12 Math, and Liz Riley is K-12 ELA, English Language Arts. So a few things to keep in mind right from the onset. These assessments are not designed to be achievement tests, as are the annual Spring NJ SLA assessments. Start Strong is an assessment designed to give us an idea of starting points for students in the fall so we could adjust and target instruction as needed. These tests were much, much shorter than the spring assessments. The tested areas for the Start Strong assessments were grades 4 through 10 for ELA, grades 4 through 8 for math, also Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 were assessed, and science in grades 6, 9, and 12. When it comes to interpreting the results, it should be noted that the Start Strong assessment was not designed to predict future student performance on the NJSLA, nor was it designed to estimate what score a student would have gotten if they had taken the NJSLA in spring 2021. The Start Strong assessment was developed in response to the disruption in education caused by the pandemic and was designed specifically to inform instruction going forward. This is why all students are described as possibly needing support, regardless of how well they perform on Start Strong assessments. So students for whom less support may be needed may or may not require additional academic instructional support in that tested content area, while students for whom strong support may be needed will likely benefit from considerable academic instructional support in the tested content area. So in short, the may be needed part is important because even students who might have answered every single question correctly is still designated as less support may be needed. So from an academic support standpoint, we learned from the results that the great majority of students identified as in need of strong support were already receiving services. It's important to point out that identifying students who would benefit from academic support and providing targeted intervention is not new. We collect in-district student performance data and provide supports you see here as needed, and these data were very much in line with the Start Strong results. So, this one? That's the one. Thank you. So the common theme you'll see throughout the results is that when compared with state averages and with peer district averages, that's DFG, district factor group, Westfield students overall had more students designated as needing less support, and at the other end of the performance spectrum, fewer Westfield students were designated as maybe needing strong support. So that's a bunch of numbers. A better visual for that is a stacked bar chart, and reading from left to right, we have Westfield students, and then in the middle, the peer district students, and then to the right is the state. The first bunch of bars is grade 4 math, then grade 5, 6, 7, 8, algebra 1, geometry, and on the end is algebra 2. The straightforward way to look at this chart is simply you want less orange, which is at the bottom, and more green, which is at the top. So with Westfield to the left side of each of those groupings, you would want to see, and you do see, more green and less orange when compared with our district factor group peers, as well as the state. So while we do not have comparative data for the results disaggregated by subgroup, we are presenting it so that all the information is shared publicly. So this slide shows math scores from left to right for female, male, special education, IEP, special education / IEP, students with 504s, English language learners, and economically disadvantaged students. As I said, there's not comparative data for this as far as state and DFGs are concerned. We also have a subgroup of race and ethnicity. So this slide shows math scores from left to right for Asian, Black / African American, Hispanic, white, and 2 or more races. So that's all the test results. At this point, I'd like to ask Liz D'Alessandro, our K-12 math supervisor, to interpret some of that and provide analysis as well.
Good evening. As part of our analysis for the assessment results, we identified areas of strength, some areas in need of support, as well as methods to address the concerns. For our elementary students, the assessments indicate strengths with multiplication and division within 100, and a strong understanding of place value, a difficult concept for young students. We identified multi-step number stories containing multiple operations as an area we are continuing to review and support throughout the year. With fractions, students need support with identifying equivalent fractions and comparing their values when using multiple representations. Within our elementary resources, teachers have access to readiness activities to help address unfinished learning prior to or within a lesson. Our textbook series spirals in concepts throughout the year to continue to develop skills towards mastery and connect current skills to prior. In addition, our Achieve program is currently in place to support students throughout the year. For our grades 6 through 8 students, the assessment demonstrated success with comparing rational numbers such as decimals and integers. Basic operations with rationals were also a strength in our scores. In the area of support, we are working with students to improve multi-step questions with rational numbers, building the conceptual understanding of the relationships between fractions and decimals, and a solid understanding of ratios and proportions. The standards within these grades build upon themselves throughout the curriculum, so teachers are using mini lessons to provide students with supports to fill in gaps between concepts. Differentiation is used regularly in all math classes as a key component of instruction to provide students with support as needed. Math intervention teachers were added this year at each of our intermediate schools to provide additional small group instructions to students needing to complete unfinished learning. At our high school, students had strengths in graphing proportional relationships, solutions for linear systems of equations, and calculating average rates of change. In terms of areas for supports for our students, we're challenged by exponent properties and applications, functions, graphing, applications of the Pythagorean theorem, factoring, and polynomials. Many of these skills are part of the continuation standards through high school mathematics, which students master by the end of Algebra 2. Our teachers are continuing to cycle through weaker concepts as mini lessons within class periods to develop prior skills in anticipation of new concepts. We have already seen improvement in some of these areas, such as in our graphing. Our physical graphing has greatly improved due to the in-class activities. In addition, math instructional supports are available for students. They include the workshop courses in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, as well as the Math Resource Center, which is open the majority of our class periods for drop-in assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So one thing from hearing each of the supervisors come up is you'll notice that there's really two main ways that we use the information, the data that comes to us. One is to target intervention and support for individual students, and the other is to take a look in the aggregate of how the students performed in certain skill areas, and then adjust instruction as might be necessary. So that's part of what Liz walked us through just there. So now we're going to take a look at English Language Arts Assessment, and just a couple of points about that. The English Language Arts Assessment was very brief, although there were long passages for the students to read. There were only 10 questions on the English Language Arts Assessment, 2 passages. There was 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction, 5 questions for each of those passages. So this is, again, a table of all of the specific results from the assessments. And then the next slide will give you that visual presentation of it that I think is a little more helpful, unless it's right in front of you. So again, well, reading from left to right, because now we're talking about ELA, it's slightly different. You have grades 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You want less orange, so Westfield is the leftmost bar in each of those groupings. The middle one is what the district factor grouping, in other words, peer districts. And then to the right, the third bar in each of those groupings is the average for the state. So again, we want less orange, more green, and across the board, that was the case for all Westfield grade levels for the ELA testing. The next slide shows us some subgroup data. Again, we don't have comparative information for that, but I will read out that we have female subgroup to the left for ELA, then male, then special ed IEP students, 504 students, English language learners, and economically disadvantaged. Another subgroup, a category, is ethnicity and race. And on this table, you see Asian, going from left to right, Asian, Black/African American, Hispanic, white, and 2 or more races. Okay. So at this time, I'd like to ask our K-12 English Language Arts Supervisor, Liz Riley, to provide a little bit of insight into what we found.
Good evening. Dr. Panaro mentioned that there were only 10 questions on the English Language Arts portion. It's important to note that each of those questions had multiple parts, a part A and a part B. So as we move through some of the areas for support and areas of strengths, we'll be able to delineate between those parts. In elementary, you can see one of the areas of strength is character traits supported by textual evidence. Part A would be identification of the character trait, while Part B would be supporting that with textual evidence. In addition, students recognize story elements and their contributions to the text. And another area of strength that focused on students' vocabulary and determining the meaning of general academic and domain-specific words and phrases. Areas for support were identified as reading referring to details when drawing inferences, determining theme and main idea, and understanding of text structures. These areas are being addressed in the classroom through analysis of benchmark assessments, along with consistent review of pacing guides and identification of curricular gaps. Our Achieve program provides students with additional instructional support. As the curriculum moves forward, we see that the areas of support for our elementary students become areas of strength for our intermediate students. Our areas of strength included understanding and interpretation of figurative language and determining theme, main idea, and key details. Students continue to work on citing textual evidence and determining the author's point of view or purpose. We're addressing unfinished learning by moving forward with grade-level content while addressing prerequisite skills as necessary, in addition to formative and benchmark assessments. Our reading and writing intervention program provides additional targeted support for identified students. Our high school students continue the trend of areas for support becoming areas of strength, which included determining author's point of view, evaluating an argument and specific claims, and determining the meaning of words and phrases as they were used in the text. Areas for support, such as accurately citing strong and thorough textual evidence and determining and analyzing theme or central idea of a text, are all addressed through prioritizing instruction to support weaker concepts. Elective classes support students as well, and our English Resource Center allows for individualized assistance and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So now we're going to move on to science, and by now I think you know the drill. We'll first just talk for a second about what the test was comprised of, then provide some of the data, and then allow Tom Patterson to come up and give us some perspective on those results. So the design of the science assessment, which was just targeted at 6th, 9th, and 12th grades, they were assessed in the core science disciplines of earth and space science, life science, and physical science. The students were measured in science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas using concept groupings of sense-making, investigating, and critiquing. This table looks smaller because it is. It's only got three tested grades in it. And again, Westfield versus compared with the district factor groupings, our peers, and state as well. So the visual representation on the block bar graph, bar chart, will again demonstrate that Westfield is on the left, DFG in the middle, state on the right in all three cases. Less orange, more green is what we want to see, and that's what that data demonstrates for us there. That's the whole tested area. We also have two subgroup categories for science as well, and those are from left to right: Asian, Black/African American, Hispanic, white, and two or more races. Okay, and our other subgroup category from left to right reads female, male, IEP special ed, 504, English language learners, and all the way on the right is economically disadvantaged. So at this time, we'll ask Tom Patterson to come up and provide some interpretation and analysis of the science results.
Good evening. Good evening. The examination of the science data showed us that our students are consistent in their overall performance across the science disciplines of life, physical, and earth and space science, as well as in the categories of sense-making, investigating, and critiquing. In trying to identify more specific patterns, the structure of the science test provided a challenge as it used an all-or-nothing scoring approach, where any incorrect component of a multiple-part question would result in no points awarded. While this likely skews the magnitudes of the support category results, the comparison to the district factor groups and statewide data in science indicates that Westfield students performed very well. An area in the data where a clear pattern did emerge was student performance on questions requiring multiple selections for an answer. There was an approximate 25% difference in performance when a student was asked to select multiple items from a potential answer list versus choosing only a single item. This indicates to us that a deeper critiquing of potential answers is something that we should be practicing. When looking at the data across grade levels, we saw encouraging results that align to ongoing curricular instructional focus areas. The elementary students showed success in observational and analysis skills while reinforcing that we will continue to develop their reporting skills. At the middle school level, students demonstrated success in areas aligned to model interpretation and explanation, while showing that they could benefit from a deeper data analysis practice. At the high school level, students were very proficient at interpreting data and explaining results, while their question and model development skills are an area for focus. Science will continue to develop student proficiency in these areas through the instructional practices already woven throughout our robust science curriculum. Thank you.
Okay, I do want to thank the supervisors once again for coming out tonight to share their expertise. I also want to thank you for your kind attention. While the data from Start Strong is intended to guide us in our instruction going forward and how to adjust curriculum, the data still does designate or demonstrate how our students were prepared for it. So I'm really proud of the efforts of the supervisors who continually, from the very beginning of the pandemic throughout, really targeted skills that were identified as needing attention. And so to me, even though Start Strong is not meant to be the same kind of data that we might get from the NJSLA in the spring, the numbers are still there, and it still suggests that our folks did a really good job, as well as the students and parents who supported them at home. So I'm really proud of the efforts that everyone put in, right down to even our instructional technology coach who helped all the teachers when we first went online in how to do this. So that goes way back, and hopefully that we'll never have to go through that again. And I do want to thank all those folks. So I guess it's worth mentioning just here as we wrap up that there will be spring testing in 2022. In preparation for that assessment, our teachers will be working with students to develop electronic test-taking skills, and the focus will include these 5 points, the last two being mostly math-oriented, but use of all the platform tools, answering multi-step questions, as you heard the supervisors reference, identifying all solutions for multiple select questions, and then the two math ones, use of the equation editor and practice with graphing tools. So in addition, our teachers are also working to expand our students' perseverance and stamina, as these were noticeable areas for improvement at all levels, which makes sense. I mean, they haven't really been exposed to this kind of assessment for a long time, and just in general, stamina comes through, repetition of these kinds of activities. So with that, I'd like to open it up to the board, or
I could just make a quick statement and observation as the new superintendent. I was not part of the Start Strong preparation that took place last year. Obviously, that led to the performance that we see tonight. So I did want to thank Dr. Panaro and all the supervisors for their work in consultation with the teachers and the principals throughout the district in order to prepare for this evening. Assessment results that really help to illustrate where we are and where we need to be. In preparing the presentation tonight, I greatly appreciated the opportunity for the data to be presented in multiple ways. Because I think when you look at the numbers, as Dr. Panaro pointed out, just looking at numbers compared side by side with one another tells one story. But then when you look at the stacked bar charts, then you start to see the other stories emerge, where our strengths are and where our needs continue to be. And whereas this is only still one area or one data point, it surely shows, our areas of strength and also our opportunities for improvement with various groups of students. So being able to use this as a means to be able to dig deeper is certainly another benefit of how our curriculum supervisors, teachers, principals, and administrators use the data. We don't use it as a simple opportunity, pound our chest saying we did great. We use it as an opportunity to say we did a great job for many, and there's great work to be done in other ways. And again, I just think we have a fantastic team who have been able to identify these opportunities for us, and will work together with our principals, teachers, and students and staff to be able to make these experiences suitable for all. So I just want to thank everyone for their preparation this evening. This being my first assessment presentation, I do want to thank you all.
thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. So, yeah, we have any questions at the board
Yeah.
table?
Yeah, I noticed across all content areas, when you broke down into subgroups, there were certain groups that were always scoring lower. And there could be all sorts of reasons behind that. But what are we doing going forward to try and close those gaps?
Yes, so one thing we did notice is that if you look historically at some of our performances on prior tests, even though that's apples to oranges, there were similar trends. And what we continue to do is use the data on an individual basis with students.
Mm-hmm.
So still, not necessarily approaching it as having all the students from one subgroup together in a classroom or something. We still
Right.
work individually with all students based on their individual needs. One thing, though, that I think will be helpful is as we go forward with our DEI goal and have our equity audit, we might find things that we haven't seen, and that could be very helpful, whether it's access to certain services, trends that are just not something that we've seen. I mean, the company that will be doing the audit for us is a professional research company that has done this dozens of times, and we think that specific to the idea of subgroups performance, they will be able to provide us with some additional insight on how we might help those subgroups.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I just had a couple of questions. The first is the areas of support that were identified, specifically in math, I think. Are those different or the same areas of support that have been identified prior?
Oh, okay, so let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. Did we find similar, in our in-district examination of student performance with regard to specific skills, did we see similar trends to Start Strong?
Yes.
Thank you for asking that question, because I think I only touched on it very briefly in the beginning. That's probably one of that's the takeaway, one of the takeaways I'm very excited about, is that it helps us see that what we're reading in the data is very similar to what the Start Strong assessment indicated, right down to the fact that students who were in need of strong support were already receiving those services. And then through the federal grants that came through, we were able to provide some additional services on top of what we normally have. So yes, that was a really good sign for us that how we were interpreting our in-district data was very much in line with how Start Strong, with the picture that Start Strong painted.
That's part of what I meant, but the other part of what I meant was, you know, like word problems were identified as an area of weakness. Prior to COVID, would that have, and I would say probably yes, but I just wanted to confirm, prior to COVID, when you analyzed PARCC scores years ago, when you analyzed and broke down performance, were those the same areas that children were struggling with then that they are now? The areas haven't changed, is what?
Right. I'm going to look
They're
toward,
nodding.
I'm going to look toward Liz, yeah.
Specifically in terms of like fractions, decimals, proportional things, these are things that develop over a series of time. So there will always be a subset of students in the past, if we looked into the data, that would have had difficulties in those areas, so it was not surprising. And as Dr. Panero had mentioned, our in-house assessments at the end of the year kind of indicated the same thing. So we knew to hit the ground running on these typical topics. Word problems, the way they are worded on state testing, is very complex. If any of you have ever looked at any of the sample testing, reading is very cumbersome, which is why when you see an ELL student scores, they may not be as successful because the reading component is has such a dense quality to it that we have to break it down. So it's not surprising where we have seen areas in need of support. Specifically at the high school, what was very interesting is when you look at where our areas of weakness were specifically on the Algebra 1 test, the Algebra 1 test and the Geometry test had many similar questions because it was all based off of the 8th grade standards rather than the prior high school, because different high schools do the courses in different orders. The students that had already taken Algebra 1 and were sitting in our geometry class, where those weaknesses in Algebra 1 were now strengths in geometry. So we are addressing them. It's just how our curriculum aligns with how the test is designed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then my next question had to do with interventions. I saw that you added interventionists at the middle school level, additional interventionists. Are those only working with the gen ed students? No, they're working across the board?
You sure?
Yeah, no problem. So when, for example, with the math program, because at the middle school, it's the first year that we ever had a math interventionist, all the students were given an assessment at the beginning of the year in addition to the spring data. So it didn't matter whether it was a student who was a regular ed or a special education student. If they qualified for if their assessment indicated that they needed to qualify for the program, they were given that opportunity.
Okay.
Are there, maybe we'll go content area by content area. So are there math questions first? Or general?
I had just one more question, and then I was done. And then anybody else. This was more of a comment. At the high school level, there is a problem with receiving extra support in English language arts, in that the writing center is not open every period, or it's not open in relation to the students' classes. Like, you have to miss a section of a certain period. It's a bizarre schedule. And I know that that's been a concern because these are students who are wanting extra intervention, and sometimes they don't have a free that aligns with when this help is available. So I think that's a really valid concern on the students' part, that they want to go for help. Apparently in math, it is much easier to access, but the writing center is really difficult for them to access, and there are no early and late hours, either no before or after school.
Yes. So we've had some conversations about those challenges, but really the best way to approach that is for, again, the individual student to meet with their counselor and whomever, the supervisors even, to try to make that work. The challenge is in their schedules. They may have to make a sacrifice here or there, but it really depends on the individual circumstances. So I don't really want to spell out the kind of circumstances or guess at what might work and what might not work. But really, the individual student, if they're really very interested, then hopefully the supervisor, and I expect that the supervisor and or teacher and counselor might be able to set something up in one way or another. Yeah.
For access to the writing lab.
Well, yeah, yes. I mean, yes.
Or some kind of writing.
Well, right,
assessment,
I mean, the student schedule and what they're willing to miss or attend has something to do with, but again, I would have to know individual, like, it would have to come down to the individual circumstance, and then
Well,
we'd
they'd have to miss a class to go to the writing center, because they don't have
Do
a
you want
free.
to- yeah.
So unfortunately, you're right. First semester, the writing lab was not staffed as frequently as we would have hoped. Second semester, it is now staffed second through eighth period, which includes every single student lunch. So that was one of our goals for second semester. Unfortunately, scheduling of the electives, the way that it worked out first semester, there were 2 periods during the day that were a little bit more challenging to fill. So with the free first and the ninth, what we do suggest is that if students do need to meet with a teacher and cannot get that English Resource Center time, that Resource Center is open for any individual meetings with teachers. So therefore, they do try to collaborate. I have people in there all the time before school, after school, but it is for the second marking, or the second semester staffed, second through eighth, for students to be able to take advantage of. But
Okay,
yes.
great, thank you.
Yes.
Question, which was, it was just intriguing to me that as you looked at assessments grouped by elementary and then intermediate and then at high school, that you would have changes throughout the different subjects, where strengths would become, needs for help, and then you almost even go back to being strengths again. And I just wondered, what is that, does that say something about how we teach our kids? Does that say something about the test itself? Any insight? I just find it kind of intriguing that it sort of flipped like
Yeah,
that.
I should probably defer to one of these folks.
Okay.
So there is some variety in the test and how they prioritize standards versus how it like aligned with our particular course structure. But you also will notice, like, for example, the 6th grade where there was a 3% difference that we had. And we were like, oh, that's very unusual situation. But when you think about it, this is students transitioning into a middle school atmosphere. It's the first month of school that they're taking it, basically. It was like the beginning of October when they were taking it. And those students had not taken a standardized test since the 3rd grade. And the 3rd grade platform is very different than the 6th grade platform. So there's a lot of those kind of variables that interjected into the features. So to pinpoint one specific thing is very hard, and it's also the language component, at least in math, played a role, as well as the stamina. Like,
Right.
that played a significant role in some areas. Students would get to the end and they just were pooped.
Sure.
You know, they took a little break on the last few questions. So that's all part of our development over this year, is to enhance all of that.
Okay, thanks.
Sahar.
First, thank you very much for all the work that the teachers put into teaching our students, especially during these difficult times. I will say, just facially, this is very promising. The numbers look good on a relative scale. So that, I think, is just something that, at least as a parent, it gives one some optimism. However, it appears that there will be the spring NJSLA as planned every year.
Yes.
And so at some point, we'll get a sense of whether there was, I don't want to use the word learning loss because I know that's a term of art, but at what point do you think that we can have a more kind of absolute measurement of how the last 2 years of online and hybrid teaching has impacted student learning, you know, if we were able to compare it as if that had never happened?
Right. Well, one of the best resources for that is actually our teachers and what they notice. And from what they say, you know, we're really close to being right on track. Of course, it would be best for that to be supported by some data. I think really again, we'd have to have some kind of comparative data available. So when the results come in from the spring assessments, we can consult with those and see how they may stack up to other comparative data. But also, by the end of the year, I would say with confidence that our teachers, along with these folks, would really have a great sense of where we're at. I can't stress enough how important it has been that our teachers had, especially early on, 24/7 tech support, both in hardware and in instructional technology use. as well as the support in the homes. I mean, we know how great a role the parents played in supporting their students. And everybody just, busted their butts trying to make sure that whatever was at risk was addressed as much as we could. So, I don't want to be all, like rose-colored glasses, but I'm really excited, and I feel like we're coming through on the other side in a good place. So I think so. I say for now, and maybe towards the end of the year, we'll talk a little bit more again about what our teachers are seeing with our in-district data, because as I said earlier, it seems that our assessments and our understanding of where the students are at is very reliable.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pinero.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to transition to our 2022-2023 budget preview. This is a presentation that I will co-present with our business administrator, Dana Sullivan, really as an attempt to be able to set common ground and common understanding about the budget development process as we enter this coming school year and preparing a budget that will address our needs. As the new superintendent walking in, one of the things that I immediately have the chance to do is assess our strengths and challenges when you're developing a school budget. Based upon the experiences of all public schools in the state of New Jersey, funding for public education is often impacted by a variety of factors that sometimes are within the realm of the school district and sometimes reside outside of the realm of the school district. And quite honestly, I wasn't sure how much of that had been discussed as a full board or full school community. So that's the reason why we want to begin a series of budget presentations sort of to set that common ground as we move forward. Because quite honestly and quite directly, as we approach a greater finality of what the sources of revenue will be, it will determine our opportunities and our challenges for the coming year. And we want to make sure that the legwork is done ahead of time to understand where we were and how we got here. So moving on to the next slide, you'll see that the presentation tonight is really just going to give a history of school funding over the last really 10 plus years. Because it really does go that far back as you look at the data and where we've been and where we are today. We'll then give an overview of what goes into school budgets and what goes into our district operating budget. And then give a general overview of the sources of revenue that school districts receive in order to fund their budgets. And each school district has a similar source of revenues, but the percentages that are included in each of those sources will vary according to the district. Likewise, the expenditures. What do we spend our money on in order to provide a quality education to all of our students? That discussion of expenditures will also give a sense of how much money is poured into the various categories of expenditures. And then ending with an overview of what we had discussed, really to set the stage for what the next few meetings will look like as we continue to get more specific data that will inform our preliminary budget development, which will be presented to the board for adoption in mid-March. So let's just jump right into the history. As you see here, prior to 2010, I don't know how many people in this room even remember, but prior to 2010, actually 2010-11, school communities voted on school budgets. So that each year, the budget development process would take place at the board level, And then boards of education and administration would go around to various constituent groups and present their school budgets in order for the community to then have the opportunity to vote on that budget. And if that budget was voted in favor for the following year, then the approved budget would be what would be used to fund all of the programs that had been allocated for it. Likewise, if a school budget was voted down, then the community had indicated that they did not approve of the budget, and that budget would then be sent over to the town council, who would then have the responsibility of making cuts to that budget. And those cuts could vary from year to year and from municipality to municipality. But the bottom line is that and early on, school budget increases could vary widely. And we have a slide that will show that trend over time. But on average, prior to 2010, our average increase to the tax levy. The tax levy is the majority source of revenue for our operating budget here in Westfield. That average tax levy increase was about 4.9%. Now, in 2011, I know individuals who have worked in or served on boards in public education, they will recall 2011 because that was the year that the state of New Jersey reduced state aid by 65%. In practical terms, that means in Westfield, we had reductions in excess of $4 million that needed to have been made to the district operating budget in light of those cuts. As you can imagine, $4 million in a budget, even our size, still has a dramatic impact and a significant impact in our ability to staff and deliver services and supports to our students. So that subsequent to that, we found ourselves being presented with a new opportunity. The state of New Jersey offered school districts and boards of education the opportunity to eliminate the budget vote. And in lieu of having the community vote on the budget, boards of education and administration, if they move their Board of Education elections from April to November, then they would be permitted to present budgets, develop budgets, and approve budgets as long as they stayed within a 2% tax levy cap. In other words, prior to 2010, we saw increases that averaged around 4.9%. After 2012, up until the present day, the tax levy impact could not increase from one year to the next more than 2%. Now that we moved our our Board of Election vote from April to November. Now, what does that mean? Well, what it means is we don't have to worry about the uncertainty of whether or not a school budget will pass anymore. But in exchange, we're limited in what we can increase our operating revenues from one year to the next by 2%. And as we all know, unfortunately, inflation doesn't necessarily adhere to that same 2% tax. And there are other costs that are out there, whether it be utilities or health benefits or other fixed costs that continue to rise that exceed 2%. So that becomes a challenge for school districts. How do you sort of make up the difference if you're only able to increase your tax levy by 2% when everything else is going up higher? What do? So over the years, Westfield has been able to submit budgets at cap with minimal reductions due to the changes in state mandated employee contributions. So over the last decade, there are changes to the health benefits contributions that public employees would make into their health benefits. So that contribution then assisted the district in being able to recoup some revenues. The changes to our health benefits program was also changed to so that as a self-insured entity, we were able to also reap additional savings. So that all of these proactive measures were able to help mitigate every time the expenditures start to exceed the revenues from year to year. So that had been the case from 2012 to 2021. Well, now we're at 2022, 2023. Any ability to exceed the 2% cap that is afforded school districts because of waivers that they may receive for healthcare or enrollment increases, those are not available to Westfield this year. All of the additional efficiencies that I had mentioned before that we've used those already, so we don't have those efficiencies anymore. So we find ourselves, again, reaching a point where our expenditures have outpaced our revenue. So I wanted to make sure that that sort of mini history lesson was clear, because where we see ourselves today hasn't always been the place that school districts found themselves. And over the past several years, there's been a lot of work, tremendous amount of work by the business office, business administrator, and previous as well as current members of this Board of Education that had been able to manage and mitigate over the past several years. But we find ourselves in a very challenging state today. Now, when you look at what goes into a budget, you know, the district budget consists of all those things that we have to do by both federal and state mandates. So that's everything from IDEA and requirements to provide services for students with disabilities, or students who are English language learners, students who require assistance and supports under the 504 requirements. We also have state mandates. Those state mandates are related to all the different curricular and standards initiatives related to everything from content area to our teaching of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to any of the non-funded mandates that come from the state that we are expected to put into place in our schools. We also have locally our own goals, our own needs as a school, as schools and school district, and input that we have through whether it be a strategic plan or just a desire for our school district to continue its tradition of excellence. All of those initiatives, both things that we want and things that we have to do, all come together in order to inform how we develop our district budget. So what I'd like to do is now hand it over to Dana Sullivan, who's going to go through the subsequent slides that really breaks down some of those key areas regarding our sources of revenue and our sources of expenditure that hopefully will help illustrate this point further.
Thank you. So as Dr. Gonzalez noted earlier, a large part of our revenue comes from tax levy. You can see on this slide about 93% of our revenue is coming from tax levy. So when we talk about the fact that we're constrained by a 2% increase, that is most of our budget that we are limited to 2%. The other large, it's not large, but larger piece of our revenue is state aid. And that is broken out into two areas on this slide. One is just state aid and the other is called extraordinary aid. And the reason that I show that as two pieces is the state aid number that shows the 4.85% is basic state aid that we do not apply for. Extraordinary aid is an aid we actually apply for, and we don't know the actual amount until the end of the year. So when we're budgeting for it, so when I'm budgeting for 22-23, I'm making an estimate and I won't know the exact number until actually the summer of 23. So it's a long time later. So about 98% of our our revenue budget is local taxes and state aid, and a very small percentage comes from other areas, namely interest, fund balance, and the student activity fee that we charge. So as Dr. Gonzalez...
Not at this time.
As Dr. Gonzalez noted earlier, prior to 2011, we were able to increase our budget and go to the community for a vote, and the average was 4.9%. So obviously that wasn't a flat 4.9% each year, and you can see on this slide that it varied from a low of 3.4 to a high of 7.9 in those years. In 2011, 2012, when the board made the decision to switch to the November election and therefore not have our budget voted on, the tax levy increase was set at a 2%, with waivers for certain areas of the budget, increases in certain areas of the budget. And that's all prescribed in the law. Most of this would be for health insurance increases. So you can see there were years where we did go as high as 3.1%, but most years we were at 2% or a little bit more. And then looking at state aid, that also decreased dramatically. We never received tons of state aid, but we certainly were up at a higher percentage, dropped to 2010, as we noted earlier. Luckily, that has started to increase a bit, and the last couple of years we have seen an increase. We're hoping that that increases for next year, although we are down in enrollment a bit from where we were a couple of years ago. So it's possible that we may not see an increase, but we're not sure at this point. We won't know those numbers until the end of this month. So when the district decided to move, as did most districts in New Jersey, to go with the 2% cap and to move the vote to a November vote, everybody's budget was frozen at that time. Your tax levy was your tax levy, and your 2% increase was based on the tax levy at that time. So the state of New Jersey takes audited data from every school district in New Jersey and puts out a taxpayer spending guide. So at that time, the most recent data that was available to districts was 2010, 2011 audited data. And this is, certain costs are taken out of this calculations that are not considered comparable from district to district. Things like out-of-district tuition, out-of-district transportation, so that these numbers are somewhat comparable. And these districts that we're looking at here are all K-12 districts with over 3,500 students. So you can see that Westfield was a low-spending district, and compared to all of these others, if you just compare us to the state average alone and multiply it by 5,800 kids, which is our current enrollment, at that time we were even higher, that's like a $10 million difference in our budget. And if you compare us to the higher spending districts there, it's like $20 million. So we were starting with a low base and then building from that low base. So when we're making reductions and efficiencies and whatnot, there were less areas for us to do that in than many other districts. So just some facts, and these are really just kind of repeats of what we said before, but 93% of the general fund revenue is from tax levy. We can only increase tax levy 2% plus eligible waivers. One of those waivers, as I mentioned, is health insurance increases. I do not expect us to be, I know we're not eligible for that this year, and that's because the state health benefit plan is not increasing for reasons that I couldn't explain of why that's not increasing, because most school districts are experiencing very high costs this year due to the pandemic, due to people not going for screenings and elective surgeries and whatnot. This year, our costs are running high. We're not alone with that. So how the state health is not increasing, I don't know, but it's not, and therefore we're not eligible for a waiver on that. There are no other waivers that we would be eligible for, and state aid is expected February 24th. That's 2 days after the governor's budget message. We do annually use fund balance as revenue. We've been using $750,000 for the last number of years. We can consider increasing that amount. We just want to be mindful that we have to be able to sustain that revenue, or we start with a shortfall the following year. So we did, as some of the board members who have been on for a while, we used to use $1.5 million, and we did make an effort to bring that down to a level that we thought was more sustainable, but that may be something we are looking at for next year to increase a little bit. The board can request voters to vote on a separate proposal. The problem with that is the budget gets voted, that part of the budget would get voted on in November. It would have to be for items that are not considered mandated. So you couldn't put any health insurance costs in there. You couldn't put any contractual costs in there. You couldn't put any special ed costs in there. And it gets voted on in November. So of course we start school in September. So if you had staff in there for a particular program or whatever, and it got voted in November, you wouldn't be able to really start that program till, or put the program back until January. So practically speaking, a separate proposal doesn't really work for these purposes. And also, if it doesn't get approved, the board can't decide to reallocate. So if you did decide to put something in a separate proposal and it got voted down, you would not be able to reallocate from a different area. That would just not be in the budget. So on the expenditure side of the budget, education, public education, most education is a very labor-intensive industry, as we know. So 81% of our budget goes right to salary and benefits. The other large parts of our budget are out-of-district tuition and outside providers for special ed services. Those would be behaviorists, OT, PT, and legal costs. So a majority of our budget is really non-discretionary areas for us, except for staffing and the programs that we do staff. So for any reductions of significant reductions we make, you can tell by looking at this chart that it has to be made in the area of staff. We just don't have, 4% of our budget is supplies and maintenance areas. Transportation mostly is mandated as well. Most of that transportation is special education transportation. Of the staffing that we do have, you can see by this chart that most of our staff deal directly and work directly with students. 46% are teachers in the regular ed program, and another 30% are special ed teachers and paras. So 76% of our staff are directly in the classroom. And then we have another almost 7% of staff that are in schools working with children as well, and those would be the nurses, guidance counselors, and librarians. And then if you add principals and supervisors who are also directly working with students, that's the majority of our staff. It's about 10% of our staff that do not work directly with children, but do support the schools and the children and work in schools. Obviously, operations are our custodians as well. So we're looking at this year non-discretionary increases that exceed 2%. Our salaries are all increasing more than 2%. Our health insurance is certainly more than 2%. Transportation costs are more than 2%. We haven't talked that much here about transportation, but I know the board members are aware that there is a national bus driver shortage. We are at the mercy of the bus companies, literally. They are able to force us to go out to bid annually if they want, if they don't want to renew a contract with us. So I am fearful that we are going to be looking at going out to bid for many, many transportation contracts next year and seeing large increases in those costs. All of our special ed costs are mandated by the IEPs for individual students. And then other smaller areas of our budget, but our utilities, of course, continue to increase, and our Social Security and retirement costs continue to increase. So just to review back to the beginning of the discussion when we talked about the tax levy increases and how prior to 2011, the average increase was 4.9%. So just to show graphically, if the blue line on the bottom is what our tax levy has actually increased since 2011, and the top line is what it would have been if we had increased the budget 4.9% a year. So we would now be $40 million higher in our budget than we are had we, we don't know 100% that it would have been 4.9%, but had we continued with those increases of them, similar to what we had before 2011, we would be significantly higher than we are right now. So we are, and as mentioned earlier, there were a number of reasons why we were able to bring those budgets in and maintain our current programs. Everybody knows we haven't been able to add too many programs. We haven't been able to add any additional support staff or anything like that. But the fact that we've been able to maintain what we have is something to be happy about, but that's coming to a point now where it's going to be difficult to do that. And this is why.
So if we look at, really today being the first of a series of presentations, we wanted to sort of give the background because in the subsequent presentations that will take place, we're going to start to get into greater detail. On February 22nd, we will give a more detailed budget presentation that includes our known expenditures and sources of revenue, as well as some assumptions that we're going to make for illustrative purposes in the areas of state aid and health benefits, because those are the two, as Ms. Sullivan pointed out, those are the two sources of revenue that make up the greatest, the two variables that make up the greatest impact on what it's going to cost to operate the district and what resources and revenues we have. So without knowing for sure, we're going to insert those so that we can have a more fruitful discussion about what the budget will look like. By March 1st, we'll have received the final state aid figures, or we fully expect to receive the final state aid figures, and we'll have the final projections that will be used to calculate our health benefits costs for the coming school year. So by March 1st, we'll have revised the February 22nd presentation to include those, and therefore have a clear picture of what areas we may need to impact in order to balance the budget. And then with that in mind, by March 15th, we must vote on a preliminary budget so that we can meet the statutory requirement to be able to submit that budget to the county for their review prior to presenting it to the board for approval and a public board, a budget hearing on April 26th. So again, the topic of conversation for the next several months and several board meetings will be budget, because this will be a major decision point for all of us, and it will certainly have an impact on both the current, the upcoming school year, as well as school years to come. Any questions?
May I just make a comment? I just want to express my deep concern with the impact this could have on the quality of education that we provide for our students. I don't want to be alarmist, and I don't know the details. First, I want to thank Ms. Sullivan, Dana Sullivan, and Dr. Gonzalez for, I can't imagine a more expert business administrator, so thank you for all your work. But my biggest concern, as someone who's also a parent of kids here in the school, is, are we going to have larger class sizes? Are we going to have less resources beyond the absolute minimum? Will we have no more enrichment programs? Will we have to cut sports programs, or no growth for extracurricular activities? The lack of a full-day kindergarten. There are all these needs that we have, and I just want to highlight, I'm really glad that we have so many people here today, because this is so important to all of us. But this is not a good position to be in, and I just want to express my own concerns with making sure we have enough funding to provide that high-quality education to all our children, because at the end of the day, without money, it's very difficult to produce quality. So thank you for enlightening us, and I think we have a lot of tough decisions ahead for the entire community.
Mm-hmm.
That concludes the administration report. Moving on to board committee reports. Amy, do you have a SIP report for us?
Yes, I do. Curriculum Committee met on January 20th. We were still meeting remotely. At the beginning of the meeting, we heard from the high school principal, Mrs. Esfendis, who's leading up a team that's taking a very serious look at the possibility of changing the high school schedule to a block schedule. And it's something that has come up over the years from time to time. Actually, Kristen is now on curriculum and remembers it being a subject when she was a teacher at the high school as well. So everything old is new again. But I think some of the changes that have been made at the high school, in part to accommodate standardized testing over the years, and particularly the kind of schedule adjustments that had to take place for the remote schooling, has really kind of put some things in perspective and helped solidify some benefits from block scheduling, to reinforce the benefits, and to highlight that maybe some of the concerns that had been viewed as overwhelming impediments maybe are not such impediments going forward. So they're continuing to discuss it. It would definitely not be anything that would be in place for next year. It would be as early as September of 2023 if there are changes to be made, but it is still ongoing and under discussion. And the high school team is breaking into subcommittees to look at different aspects of it. And we are supportive and remain curious to learn more about it as we move forward. So that was really interesting. Again, not something we're voting on tonight because it's very much in the exploratory stages. We also did talk with our K-12 mathematics supervisor, Liz D'Alessandro. She was there to review with us the K-5 math curriculum, which was being revised this year. And we used that as a sort of a springboard to discussing the process with two new curriculum members, two new members of the Board of Education joining us for the first time as to how curriculum is revised, and how that process works, which I think was really helpful. So that curriculum is on tonight as an action item that we'll discuss. We also talked about some of our own scheduling concerns. We also talked about a conversation that had been brought up at previous SIP meetings about maybe ways that the high school could get involved in helping to structure opportunities for summer internships for students. I think that is a lot farther away as a potential item, but definitely a good idea. We definitely hear lots of good ideas in curriculum, and some come from our members and some come from the supervisors and the teachers as well. And then we also got a bit of an update from Paul on the district goals relating to SIP. So we talked a little bit about the framework for the district goal for DEI, and what the work that's being done kind of behind the scenes, not through the Board of Ed at this point, but through district supervisors and teachers. Talked a little bit about upcoming revisions for health and PE curriculum, but again, still on the horizon at this point for the curriculum committee. And talked about academic support through a new program called Response to Intervention, and training associated with that. So that's what we talked about. Our next meeting is going to be next Wednesday, part of our change up. And then just to give people a preview, the items that we are going to be voting on tonight for curriculum instruction. So if you wanted to comment, these would be the items you could comment in during the first comment period. We're approving for second reading curricula that we talked about at our last meeting. World languages curriculum for grades 6, 7, and 8, and exploratory Spanish 1 and exploratory Spanish 2 at the high school. Also, gifted program curricula for the elementary schools are up for second review. And then the aforementioned K-5 elementary mathematics curriculum is up for first reading. That's our second item. There is a district field trip for the color guard for the wintertime. One student teacher to be approved. And then the following item, we didn't talk about at the curriculum meeting, but it's included as part of the packet for tonight, and the board members, I received it via email, is the state requires that the English language learner program submit a 3-year plan, and we were due up for that. So that's an attachment. It follows, again, as was alluded to earlier tonight, the somewhat peculiar way that the state asks for information sometime. But we are fortunate that some of us had been able to hear very recently from Mr. Pinkay about how the program works. And it's an amazing program, really, in that we have such a variety of students who come from different home languages, and the program adapts to interact with all of those students. So that's a distinction that's made. In some districts, they have a predominant foreign-speaking language, and so they have a bilingual program in that language, let's say Spanish. Our students come from all over, and there's a variety of languages, and so our program is a little bit different that way, but fascinating. So those are the 5 items up for curriculum for tonight.
Thank you.
There is no facilities report this evening. We haven't met since our last meeting, but we are scheduled to meet next Thursday, February 17th. Then we'll have an update the following meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Amy, back to you for finance.
Back to me for finance. We had a finance meeting on January 14th in person and got to meet with some of our auditors who come and do the annual audit every year. Good news is everything's working well in the district. Controls are good. The auditors were pleased. It is not in its final report yet, but it's as close to final as we can get while we await some state numbers to fill it in. So that was a good update to hear on that. And I think that gets addressed. Does that get addressed at a? Okay.
Weeks.
Terrific. Okay, great. Thanks, Dana. We also reviewed where we stand on health benefits, as Dana alluded to earlier. The numbers are running high for this year, which make us nervous for next year. And we are trying to get the best information possible, hoping that the numbers start to come down a little bit as we look at what the premium numbers would be like for next year. So that's to be continued. Watch this space. Same is true for fund balance projections. We'll be hearing more about that as we move forward. And then the overall discussion about the realities of next year's budget, as we've heard highlighted already, and we'll continue to hear as we move forward. With regard to the finance agenda for tonight, we have a couple change orders. We have contract with a what's it called? The purchasing organization. And then we have a gift to acknowledge. We have some capital changes, disbursements from the capital fund for a couple of things, including a memorial for the high school courtyard this spring. We hope to be able to have sort of an interim acknowledgement and placing of the memorial in the springtime before things are finally finished up there. And that's pretty much the highlights. Our next meeting for finance is next Tuesday afternoon at its new time. Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
Sure.
All right. Now I'll turn it to myself for the last committee reports. Long-range planning, we need to get some dates on the calendar. That'll take more of a priority once we get through the budget. For policies, the policy committee met on the 25th of January. We set our goals for the year as a committee. Goals for the end of the school year. Earlier in the school year, we had our policies audited by a firm, and we are going to be implementing the recommended changes over the next couple months. In that same process, I want to really overhaul our bylaws, as many of them are out of date or clunky, particularly with regard to the bylaw about how our committees are structured. So that's actually the first one that we're going to be looking at as a committee, is how we want to structure committees among the whole board. To implement that a little faster as we're revising bylaws, I'm asking the board at our next meeting to revise bylaw 131 to reduce the timeline notification. Model policies say just a first reading and a second reading. Our bylaw has a time frame for bylaw changes where board members have to be notified 10 days ahead of time, and they have to be voted on a month apart, making any changes trying to get them done by June logistically difficult. I'll be asking the board to reduce that from 5 to 5 days on the notification, which would be the Friday before a board meeting, when the rest of the agenda is published, and then up to a minimum of 2 weeks between first and second reading. We then started talking about our code of conduct in response to, well, two things. One, we have to review it every year by state law. And second, in response to the issues of graffiti, in particular, hate graffiti in the high school, we want to see if there's ways we can address that in a more targeted manner. So the revisions that we proposed have been circulated to the administration, and at our next committee meeting, we will discuss their proposed changes. Lastly, we're looking at moving our policies from schoolboard.net to a professionally hosted platform through Strauss Esme, which is the service provider we use for our model policy language. They have a service where they will host them for us. We can still make our edits and make them Westfield policies, but they'll be hosted in a place by a tool that's meant for hosting policies. And that's the highlights from policies. We have nothing on the agenda to act on tonight, but it's just a rundown of what we talked about and what will be coming down the pipeline going forward. All right, any questions for anybody on any of the committee reports? All right. With this, I'll open up the floor to public comment. During this portion of the meeting, the district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on agenda action items only. The board requests that individuals state their name and address for the record, the specific action items that they're commenting on, and asks that all remarks be directed to myself. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility nor will be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, the superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by phone, telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate that participant's statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes in duration. I ask anybody that would like to make a comment on action items to line up along the wall.
Kyle George, 605 Short Hills Court. On the agenda tonight that you're voting on, there's a finance item for $2.1 million in IT spending. There's no itemization of that spending. A lot of talk about money tonight, a lot of talk about budget issues. That's a lot of money to be spending without itemized usage of that. Hopefully the board has actually reviewed the usage of that $2.1 million worth of funds to purchase that equipment. And if you haven't, well, you should. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Hi, guys. My name is Nick Lechner. I'm at 554 Highland Avenue in Westfield. Two things. One, on the IT budget, I am kind of curious on this, and I want to talk about the mask, but I work in IT, like that wireless access point, those are the types of things that I sell.
Please keep your mask on. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. It's
That's
state law.
fine.
We've got to keep following it.
Yep, no worries. I'm wondering, I didn't see any sort of grant funding as part of the revenue stream. You know, it seemed like most of it comes from, taxation in the town. Is there someone that uses grants, finds grants, finds funding for not just this $2 million IT spend, but other things? Because I'm often very, very surprised by the fact that I go to my customers, which are very large healthcare customers, that have access to funding from like CARES Act, and they don't take advantage of money that could just be given to them. Is there someone in the is this dialogue or monologue? I'm just curious.
Monologue.
Okay. It would be great if you guys could look into that, and if I'm happy to provide my information if you're looking for some more details on the type of funding that could become available to the town. Because I agree with you, Ms. Aziz, that it's definitely something we should be concerned about. On masks.
We aren't taking any action on masks tonight, so if you could wait till the second comment for any mask-related comments.
Well, I think that's why we're all here tonight, to discuss that.
Yes.
But I think that's the problem here. There's no actionable item. When I was a kid at a YMCA, I worked as a camp counselor, and it was very interesting because the first thing they told me is, when a kid asks a question and you don't want to answer it, you say, like, what time are we doing this? You say soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I feel like that's what we're getting here, we've been getting for 2 years, is soon. It's, we're just looking
There is no
for-
board action on this topic tonight. Thank you.
You can bring it up.
Oh, I
At
can
the
bring it up.
second, at the second comment session.
Okay. Okay, this is for IT. I got that in though.
Come back.
Mhm.
I can't talk in this mask, so I have to talk
No,
in this mask. Oh, I
you
know,
have
I
to-
gotta wear a mask. I'm wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Get my mask on. So I just need to understand, why is this not an actionable item?
Can you hear me? Perfect. An actionable item is an item on the agenda on which the board is going to vote yes or no. That's an actionable item. There is no item on the agenda where the board is going to vote yes or no having to do with masks. There is a second public comment section during the
No, I
meeting.
understand that part. You don't need to re-explain that. I just
Okay.
wondered, taking the current environment and everything going on, how is this put way down on the items upon which we can discuss?
Again, ma'am,
I know.
second portion.
Not an actionable item. I get it. It just goes to show where we are.
Darren Composto, 929 Columbus Avenue. Regarding the Start Strong data that we reviewed before, what stood out to me was that the economically disadvantaged kids are the ones that need the most help, but not voting on that. So, okay, even though it was an agenda item, it's not something that we
And
can
it's
discuss.
specifically action items.
Okay.
I have something maybe you can vote on. But you guys did
Name
take
and
an
address.
executive.
Name and address.
Oh, my name is Kimberly Matera, and I'm on Standish Avenue in Westfield. So you guys did add the executive session that you took to the agenda without informing any of us until we got here, so we didn't know that. So perhaps you can take a vote about letting us discuss what we all came here to discuss. So, you know, we sat here while you guys were gone, which,
At the public comment section, that's all. We're not going to create an action item.
but
so
it's
that-
already been 2 hours, and you guys left the room without telling us. It wasn't on here that you were gonna leave the room.
We
Are you
left the
gonna do
room
that
in
again?
executive session because we needed to discuss something in executive session.
So
Period, end of
Are you gonna do
story.
that again, or are you just gonna follow this, or are you gonna do it again?
Madam, I would suggest that you take a seat and wait till the next section on public comment, and then you can say anything that you want about masks.
Okay.
All right. All right, moving on. I asked the board to to approve governance item 1. This is to affirm the superintendent's decision in HIB incidents. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, scrolled right past it. I asked the board to approve the minutes of,
Did we close public?
Hi, I'm sorry, I just wanted to speak about the budget. Is that okay, or
There-
did you close this section yet?
there's no action on the budget tonight.
The action, so you're not taking action on that?
Nope.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Public comment is closed. I asked the board to approve the minutes from the January 18th, 2022 board meeting and the executive session for the same date. Thank you, Amy. Dana? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Any abstentions? All right. Now, on to governance. I asked the board to affirm the superintendent's decision in HIB incidents 22E05, 22E06, 22E07, and 22R01 for the reasons set forth therein. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sonal. Dana?
Sahar Aziz? Yes. Rob Benatu?
Yes.
Mike Phelan?
Yes.
Brenda Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Leila Morelli.
Yes.
Sonal Patel.
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes?
Kristen Sonic Smeltz.
Yes.
Mary Wickens.
Yes.
Thank you. Sahar?
I move the board to approve personnel items 1 through 22. Can I get a second? All right, Leila, second. Does Dr. Gonzalez want to say a few words about those who are retiring?
So this evening, we have 3 individuals who are going to be accepting their retirements, beginning with Joanne Scutari. Joanne is the secretary to the assistant superintendent in the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Programs. 19 years ago, Joanne's first position in the district was as a paraprofessional at Washington School, where she helped her students with organizational skills and paying attention to details. Joanne brought those same valuable skills to Paul's office, along with her ability to research and teach herself just about anything. Joanne's many contributions include innovating and streamlining procedures using technology and being the point person for the district's professional development and for grant applications. Joanne is looking forward to spending time with her family, particularly with her young grandson. Also, this evening, we have Elise Brunhofer. For the last 21 years, Elise has been an elementary Spanish teacher working with students at Washington, Jefferson, and McKinley schools. She joined the staff at a time when the Spanish program was expanding at the elementary level and took pride in helping students speak in the target language. She has created student-centered activities using her deep knowledge of Spanish culture and has a vast collection of children's books written in Spanish that her students love. Elise frequently uses songs with her young learners to help them to learn to count, tell time, and learn vocabulary, and she has said that she will miss the excitement of third graders learning to speak in another language. Last but not least, we have Stacy Stanzel, who has spent all of her 35-year career as a respected and loved second grade teacher at Wilson School. A valuable cornerstone and acknowledged leader of both the building and the Teachers Association for decades, Stacy generously shares her deep knowledge of curriculum, particularly in the area of literacy, with her colleagues. She maintains a model classroom and uses data from student assessments to plan and adjust her instructional strategies. The organizational technique she provides her students gives them lifelong skills, and among Stacy's greatest gifts to the district have been the number of novice teachers she has coached and mentored to help them find success as educators over the years. We wish these 3 retirees healthy and happy years ahead.
Does anyone have any comments?
Sahar Aziz.
Yes?
Rob Bonaccio.
Yes.
Mike Beelan.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Leila Morelli.
Yes.
Sonal Patel.
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes?
Kristen Sonic Smeltz.
Yes.
Mary Wickens.
Yes.
Thank you. Amy?
Yep, I would like the board to consider finance items 1 through 12. Could I have a second?
It's actually 13 now. I made, we added the 13, which is an acceptance of Alyssa's law grant.
Yes, and I don't have that in front of me. Can you call it up? Because oh, gosh. Okay, all right, great, thank you. Okay, so items number 1 through 13. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thanks, Sonal. I'll take Sonal. All right, just wanted to call out that item 12, we are moving to accept the grants worth $6,274.58 from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts to fund the items including ceramics equipment for Edison, color printer for the high school's graphic design class, microphones for Edison's intermediate school's drama department, and bell kits for Edison's music department. We are very, very grateful for the support of the Westfield Coalition for the Arts and very thankful for all that they allow us to offer in the manner of extras that we can't quite manage to do on our own. Item 13, as Dana mentioned, is the submission and acceptance of the Alyssa's Law Security Grant in the amount of $353,018. Any questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, Dana, could you speak one to the Alyssa's grant? Because I know we've applied for that a long time ago.
We applied for that a long time ago. The state took forever to approve it. We did just get approval recently, and now you're required to accept it, even though you actually approved the acceptance before, but they now are requiring, this is different than their other grants for some reason. They're requiring an acceptance after it's been approved by them. So that's what we're doing tonight.
I can't see us turning down $360,000.
No, and it's designated already for expenditures in compliance with the grant, of course, which is all for security. So it's for cameras and other areas, other security things in the schools.
Yeah, and can you speak to the technology purchase?
The
Since
$2.1 million,
it's
it's to replace all of the switches in the district. It's for our network. I can't go into much more detail than that,
Okay.
but
Regarding the technology upgrade. Because it came up, does that include any of the costs? Because I know Brian Walker is looking at upgrading the Chromebooks throughout the district. Is that included in any of that?
no. This is just for the
Just for the switches.
infrastructure. Right, this is just for the network infrastructure switches, and things related to the replacement of the switches. Yeah, it's.
Oh, okay, yes, it's
Right.
capital, okay.
Right, and it's been discussed, I believe, in the technology committee over the past year or probably more.
Yeah, he has discussed it.
It's been on our 5-year
Yeah, this is
plan as
not
well.
new, the technology switches. The
Right.
switches do not come cheap. That's what really adds to the cost, but there's a number of other technology initiatives that are going on. So I just wanted to make sure what it covered. Okay.
Yep.
And just real quick, also, item number 4 relates to expenditures to support a new website for the district, so parents and community members will see that moving forward. And one of the first portions of the funds are towards a mobile app, which will be much more user-friendly than what we currently have, which I think will be really helpful. Sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say something.
I just wanted to reiterate what Mike said, because when I was on the technology committee this past year, we did discuss the need for the infrastructure improvements, which would affect, among other things, and Mike, you can weigh in because you have more expertise on technology, but the internet speed, the internet quality, and all, just the basic infrastructure. But this is something that has been discussed through committee. It has been examined in terms of its budget, and we, as a board, do not, as a matter of practice, vote on something that is $2 million without doing our due diligence. So it is part of our process.
You ready for a vote? Yep. Sahar Aziz?
Yes.
Rob Bonaccio?
Yes.
Mike Beelan? Brenda Galligan? Leila Morelli? Sonal Patel? Amy Root? Kristen Sonic-Schmeltz? Mary Wickens?
I'd like the board to consider curriculum items 1 through 5. Could I have a second? Thanks, Leila. I already outlined them in the committee reports, so in the interest of time, I'll just move along unless any board members have questions or comments about any of the items. Nope. Go ahead.
Looked at for the K to 5?
Beyond,
Just revise it, just beyond everyday math, or no? You
beyond K to 5? I mean, everyday math is incorporated in it,
just- Yes, if any other curriculum was looked at.
We didn't discuss
textbooks
what
or-
wasn't included. We did discuss what was included, which was a revision of what we had.
Of what you already have, okay. Just, okay, I get it now.
So if you had thoughts about potential changes or revisions or questions moving forward, please, let me know, and I'm happy. No, I'm
I was
happy to
just curious how
ask
the
the question.
process worked with the revision, if it was a revising, like, included textbooks or what you used, or just, what goes along with the state standards.
We talked about.
And I guess the addition. Did the addition change for everyday math? Because it's everyday math 4?
We didn't get into that
Oh,
level of
okay.
detail at the meeting, but sounds like if you have questions, we can certainly get some answers for you.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah, sure, sorry. Anyone else? No, okay. All right.
Sahar Aziz?
Yes.
Rob Bonaccio? Mike Beelan? Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Leila Morelli. Sona Patel. Amy Root.
Yes?
Kristen Sonic Smeltz. Mary Wickens.
I ask the board to take note of the notes for the record. And any unfinished business? Any new business? Liaison reports.
Keep moving.
All right.
Okay.
All right, now we're going to open up the second public comment session. During this portion of the meeting, members of the public are invited to address the Board of Education on any topic. The board requests that individuals state their name and address for the record and asks that all remarks be directed to the board president or designate, not to individual board members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, the superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during this public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal of the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's statement will be limited to 3 minutes in duration.
Good evening. My name is Allison Russo, and this is my daughter Ella, and she would like to make a personal impact statement. Our address is 1031 Minnesink Way.
Thank you for taking the time to hear me speak. My name is Ella Russo. I'm a 5th grader at Franklin. Even though I'm a 5th grader and expected to learn at 5th grade level, it has been tough given how much school we have missed. This year has been better, but it's still tough because we have to wear a mask. I can barely hear my teacher speak. I can't read her facial expressions. In fact, I barely even know what she looks like. I'm falling behind, and I'm so scared to go to middle school next year. If I'm falling behind now, how am I supposed to do in 6th grade when I haven't had normal school in over 2 years? Your decision tonight will impact me for the years to come, because if you make the wrong choice, I won't have the same chance to learn as much as kids from other towns and states. I have started to notice that cousins and friends of mine that live in other states haven't had to wear a mask and are ahead of me in learning. Before COVID, I was ahead of them. I am here today to ask you to let the students in Westfield learn. The only way they can do that is without a mask. Wearing a mask in school makes no sense. I'm with my classmates at dance, at sports, at restaurants, at their houses, having sleepovers, at birthday parties with no mask. But when it comes to school and I'm actually social distance, I need to wear a mask? This makes no sense. Why are masks at school the last thing should be lifted? They should be the first. Thank you for the time and listening to me. I'm just asking to be given the same chance to learn as most kids in the country. Thank you for your time.
Hi again.
Name and address, please.
My name's Kimberly, and I am from Standish Avenue in Westfield. Am I on the clock?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first, I'd like to say thank you to the board members for everything you've done the past 2 years. I know it hasn't been easy. Even though we are angry, we are frustrated, and we are exhausted from fighting for our children, we know that you ran for the Board of Education because you also want what's best for our children. But you might feel the same anger, frustration, and exhaustion when explaining to your kids why they need to wear a mask to school. We told them what we thought was the truth for the past 2 years, that we needed to wear a mask to help other people stay safe. Now, we know that is not true. So what do we say now when our kids ask, why do we have to wear a mask to school if it's not helping other people? Well, it's because our superintendent, our Board of Ed, our Board of Health, our principals, our mayor, and other leaders of this community did not stand up and say, wait a minute, we know that the masks are useless, so let's say something. Let's speak out. Now, you are all looking to the state for guidance because you're too scared to stand up for what you know is right. Is that the generation of children we want to raise? Don't we want to teach our kids to be critical thinkers? We cannot raise a generation of kids who just comply because their leaders don't have the guts to stand up and say, wait a minute, this feels wrong. Doesn't it feel wrong to drop your kids off at school, to eat lunch sitting 6 feet apart and wear a mask all day while you go about your day mostly unmasked? We've all seen you around town. We've seen you unmasked at Starbucks. We've seen you unmasked with your families for dinner. We've seen you in Adam's Tavern unmasked. Yet you still continue to be okay with our kids wearing masks to school for no reason. But if you're not okay with it, then what are you doing about it? In just a matter of a few days, we've managed to gather over 360 Westfield residents who all support mask choice in Westfield. I ask you to join our Facebook page. Take a look and
30
read
seconds.
to see what people are saying. Maybe you too will speak up and you will realize that you do not need guidance to remove the masks.
Hi, my name's Kate Oakes. I live at 740 Embry Crescent. I think you can all agree that we're all here to discuss the masks and the lack of knowledge that coincides with the mask use. Dr. Gonzalez, thank you for your email today. Although it did have a hint of optimism, I found it very frustrating. You seem to think that there's metrics that need to be, in place for the mask to be removed. I'm not really certain I understand what you mean by those. If cases stay decreased and vaccinations are increased, I really don't know how either of those things have any relevance on mask use, because all the studies that I've found show that masks are useless. Nobody wears them anywhere other than in the school buildings, which makes zero common sense. So in all, masks have violated our constitutional rights, and you enforcing kids to wear a mask have then violated their constitutional rights. I have something else. I'm deeply disappointed and kind of disgusted by your promotion of the vaccine for children in our town. I did have a question I wanted to follow up. How much money does the town of Westfield receive per vaccination? Does the Board of Ed receive any of that? Like, do you get money if more students are vaccinated? COVID is not and has never been a deadly threat to children. I have 4 children. All of them have had COVID. All their friends have had COVID. Everybody I know has had COVID. We've had the flu in my house. We've had Coxsackie. We've had the stomach bug. We've had strep throat. We've probably had everything that you could have. We're all good. And those viruses were worse than COVID. I could not find one study to support the vaccination of a child. This vaccine, as y'all like to call it, is actually an experimental therapeutic. It's not stopping the spread of the virus. It's not reducing the viral load. It's not stopping the infection. I apologize for my ignorance here, but why are you promoting a vaccine that's essentially useless? So in addition to being useless, it can be very dangerous to a child that's actually had COVID. There was no
30
people.
seconds.
Yep, there's no people in the Pfizer study that were previously infected from COVID, so they have no idea what this vaccine will do to someone that's had COVID. And in fact, I've seen a number of people been negatively impacted by it. So I just want to know, if you're creating barriers or segregating children based on their vaccination status, which essentially could coerce someone into getting the vaccine, you're liable. So if anything happens to them, you're liable for that.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Great job, girls. It's hard to follow you guys. My name's Emily McDonough. I live at 322 Hillside Avenue. And I want to thank you for hearing us. I know you tried to, wait us out, but it didn't work. I'm just kidding. Okay, so Dr. Gonzalez, thank you for the email we got today. I was actually really excited about, obviously we were all waiting for it. We saw the news from other towns. And when I saw your email, I was really disappointed because it just seems so hesitant and gloomy, and I'm so over that. The cautiously optimistic, waiting for more guidance. That's gotta be from Megan Avalone, because I can't take that guidance. We don't need any more guidance. The vaccination rate rising, and barring anything else happens. I can't have that negativity. So the New Jersey Board of Health and Governor Murphy ended the mask mandate. That's the end. That's the end of the story. Let the story end. Even if something else happens, masks should never come back because we know they don't work and they've done so much damage already to our kids that I shouldn't even have to mention right now. The education, social, especially kids with disabilities. I mean, this is really awful. It's so detrimental, it feels criminal that we've done this to our children, that we failed them. Now, the vaccination rate, as Kate had said, has nothing to do with mask choice. And they're separate things and you cannot combine them, okay? So we know that the vaccine has no efficacy for stopping the spread of COVID-19. It doesn't, because how do I know? Because like Kate said, everyone had it. Vaccinated, boosted, I mean, everybody. It doesn't matter, they're gonna get it all over town. And natural immunity, why aren't we talking about that? The last study shows that it can last for 22 months, and it's only been 22 months because that's how long it's been around. It might be longer. So we need to learn to live with this like we did years ago, for hundreds of years when we had the flu. Do you remember going to school and there were 3 kids in the class? We didn't ask anybody. When you're sick, you go home. When you're healthy, you go to school. And that's how it needs to be today. Now, if anyone in the public school system ever tries to separate, or I heard the word segregate children based on vaccine status, and I'm not a litigious person, but I can't imagine the lawsuits that would come your way. That's discrimination and deplorable, and it should not even be thought about. Our children are important. We have to have their interests, their best interests at heart. Please, you have to stop this. Just let it end. We can live with it. We have to learn to live with it.
Hi, I'm Lori McCormick. I'm at 917 Tice Place. I'm a graduate of Westfield High School. I have 3 young children in the school system. I'm also a middle school teacher in a nearby district. To begin, I was ecstatic and relieved to hear the governor announce the end of the mask mandate, and I urge you to do the same for the children in our district, and I urge you to do it sooner rather than later. As an educator, I have seen the negative psychological and emotional effects of these masks on our youth, and it is downright scary. I see students who were formerly active participants in class retreating into silence. I see students who are usually quiet becoming more introverted. I see spirits that are broken from a childhood that has been ruthlessly and carelessly compromised. I see anxiety and depression like I have not seen in my 14 years of teaching. Anyone, especially any educator, who says the kids don't mind the masks is completely and utterly out of touch. Completely. I can no longer stand idly by. I can no longer watch my own young children, ages 3, 6, and 8, who are masked more waking hours during the week than they are not masked. Let's call that what it is. That is child abuse. We know the statistics, but I'll read you some. A May 2020 article by Research, May 2020, from Harvard Medical School, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, concluded that face masks offer little, if any, protection. I could go on and on. You know the numbers, yet our children are still masked. Please follow the science and follow suit like many districts around ours already have. And lift the mask requirement. Give our students and staff mask choice. In addition to lifting the mask requirement, I also urge you to end the close contact isolation periods and excessive testing. The vaccinated versus unvaccinated guidelines are creating discrimination amongst the student population. One of the board goals for this year, equity and inclusion. Yet these guidelines you have upheld are creating discrimination, exclusion, and even bullying. I have heard many stories of students, including children of my own. They have told me that vaccinated students are telling unvaccinated students to stay away. Additionally, if you follow the data in schools, we know close contacts are by and large not materializing into positive cases, and we know, especially amongst children, there's no difference in symptoms or transmissions between the vaccinated and unvaccinated, especially with the latest strain. We live in a free country where we celebrate freedom of choice. Please don't take this freedom of choice away from parents who are educated in deciding not to vaccinate their kids. When you support guidelines that take in-person learning away from unvaccinated children because they are being forced to isolate when they are deemed a close contact, give me 1 minute, not a minute, just a few seconds. You are vilifying them and their parents' right to choose, and likewise participating in the most ruinous kind of discrimination, educational neglect. We know by now children are not high risk. Children are not the super spreaders. Please leave the children out of this.
Good evening, my name is Sue Taddeo, and I live at 612 Fairmont Avenue. My name is Sue Taddeo, and I live at 612 Fairmont Avenue. I listened to the Board of Health meeting last night and was ecstatic about the 20 or more parents that spoke up advocating for mask choice. I've never been a fan of the mask for me or my children. Putting material over your face for extended periods of time, common sense says that it cannot be good for you. You are literally breathing in the carbon dioxide your body is trying to expel. I'm a licensed pharmacist for the last 20 years. Dr. Budnick stated last night that originally the measles vaccine was originally approved for 1 dose, and therefore he ended up contracting measles. He insinuated that science is always changing and therefore extra doses were eventually needed. My sister was born with a rare bone disease. In the 70s, when she received the DTP vaccine, she had an adverse reaction. I want to say it was anaphylactic. My mother told the MD not to separate the 3 vaccines. He did not listen, and my sister's reaction was worse. I tell you the story because in the 80s, the DTP vaccine was reformulated to DTAP, which is what all of our children receive now. This was done because of all the adverse events that occurred. I also say this, that the original vaccine went through all the necessary studies to bring a drug and vaccine to the market and was still removed after 10 years because of the adverse events. Now, I don't want to talk about the vaccine, but my point is, Dr. Budnick is correct in saying that science is always changing. We know now that per the CDC that cloth masks do not work. So we put our children in these masks for almost 2 years now, and they never worked. We put extra unnecessary stress on the kids. Teachers spent more time correcting the kids on how to wear the mask and actually teaching. It's a waste of our teachers' and kids' time. I've had enough. Our community has had enough. Please follow the direction of Governor Murphy and end the mask mandate. Now, let me say for the record, we are not asking you to tell everyone that they cannot wear a mask. We are asking you to give us, the parents, a choice. Meg Avalon stated last night that she would like to see the vaccine status of our children to go up in order to feel more comfortable. Why? Every person I know who was vaccinated contracted Omicron over Christmas. We know now that both vaccinated and unvaccinated can spread it. So I ask you to listen to what seems to be a majority of parents who have elected you to your seats. Give us a choice. One last point. Governor Murphy stated that we are going to have to learn to live with COVID. It is going from a pandemic to endemic. So I ask you, if you do not uphold Governor Murphy's decision to end the mask mandate, then when will you? How long will this go on? What are your metrics? I would like definitive answers to these questions if you do not end this mask mandate.
Thank you.
I hope you do the right thing.
Kyle George, 605 Short Hills Court. A lot of people here to talk about masks, so I'm going to do something different. Last week, there was a panel hosted by the Westfield Human Relations Commission. This panel was prompted by the recent spate of anti-Semitic and other graffiti in Westfield High School. The panel was comprised of 7 members, including Mayor Brindle. 3 of 7 panel members were from WPS, including Dr. Gonzalez. At the start of the panel, a non-exhaustive list of bias incidents in Westfield since 2018 was read aloud. Over 2 hours, only around 10 to 15 minutes was spent directly addressing anti-Semitism, mostly by one panelist. That's about 10% of the time. Yet 100% of the 2018 through 2021 bias incidents read aloud and that the moderators said took place in Westfield Public Schools were anti-Semitic. So the panel spent only 10% of the time talking about 100% of the problem. What did we spend that other 90% of the time on? Well, people discussed topics such as skin color-based privilege, maternal care, and microaggressions. I recall no specific plan for combating anti-Semitism being offered by the 3 panelists from WPS. Mr. Israelo, former chairman of the American Jewish Committee of New Jersey, made the substantive remarks about anti-Semitism. Yet when his remarks were reported on by one local news org, they reported only on synagogue security measures and chose to quote his brief opening remarks thanking the panel for the invitation. They did not quote anything he said that directly addressed anti-Semitism. Please allow me. Mr. Israelo spoke about the AJC's education, advocacy, and coalition building efforts. AJC has a Mayors United Against Anti-Semitism campaign that meets with mayors, introduces them to AJC, and provides examples of anti-Semitism. In AJC's guide called Translate Hate, mayors are introduced to terms and phrases with anti-Semitic meaning like, quote, dual loyalty, from the river to the sea, Jewish capitalists, Zionism is racism, and many others, end quote. Mr. Israelo said that the city of Westfield adopted AJC's definition of anti-Semitism via resolution last year. He went on to describe initiatives related to interfaith relations. Meanwhile, one member of the BOE regularly tweets and/or retweets articles that call Israel an apartheid state, accuses it of crimes against humanity, and even retweeted an article that sought to redefine the meaning of the phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, last week. That phrase is specifically called out by both the Anti-Defamation League and AJC as anti-Semitic, and Mr. Israelo mentioned it as well. This wasn't a misunderstanding. The board member is an expert in this region of the world. To be clear, she is of course entitled to her opinion as an American, but there are protocols and decorum for BOE members, and the BOE must govern in the best interest of all
30
students.
seconds.
How can we trust the BOE to help solve the problem of anti-Semitism in the schools and to create an inclusive environment for Jewish children when they can't contain their own members politicking? If a child were to walk up to a Jewish child and say, quote, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free of Jews, end quote, they would no doubt be guilty of a Hib incident. The BOE should hold itself to the same standard.
And you had to be vaccinated to attend that event. Lisa D'Onofrio, 1000 Stewart Ave. I want to speak tonight about choice. If parents felt that they had a choice, you would not see all these people here tonight, and you'd probably have a nice, quiet meeting. Where there is risk, there must be choice. From the beginning, I and many others that have come to these meetings are not against masks or vaccines. We are for choice. That gets lost, and many of us get categorized as anti. It's simply not true. Giving parents and teachers a choice is the only solution here. Our teachers that haven't taken the vaccine are forced to show up every Tuesday and test, whether they have symptoms or not, just to do a job that they love. How is that not discrimination? What choice do they have if they want to keep their job? The unvaccinated children are forced to quarantine even if they're not sick, when the vaccinated children can return to school. How is that not discrimination? What choice do the kids have? When a teacher or a coach, and this has happened plenty of times, asks for a vaccination status of a child in front of their classmates and their teammates, what choice do they have not to answer and be exposed? When a teacher threatens the students with keeping their mask over their nose and doesn't allow them to take a sip of water, what choice do they have? When some Westfield schools ask parents for vaccine cards to attend events, what choice do parents have? While I'm thrilled with the March 7th mask mandate lift, I am concerned with the strings attached. There will be, I'm sure. Will there be different rules for the vaccinated, just as there currently are with the quarantine policy? Do not allow this to happen for our children. As it pertains to sports, the New Jersey Department of Health has recommended that unvaccinated athletes not participate or test 2 times per week when COVID cases are high. Regardless of case count or county zone colors, I encourage this district to provide parents the choice to mass vaccinate or test their children in order to play sports. I want to go on record as providing each of you with my compilation of Vax Facts via email. However you feel about the COVID vaccine, it is not, nor has ever been, the only solution in fighting or treated COVID, despite what this town says. Each fact is backed with supporting link. I strongly encourage not only the board, but every parent in this town to educate yourself about the documented side effects of the non-FDA approved vaccine that's only available in this country, and that this vaccine does not stop infection or transmission.
30
I will
seconds.
leave you with this quote that I absolutely love. Whether or not you want to see truth, the truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Just let it loose. It will defend itself. It will come out. Thank you.
Good evening. Aaron Kolchinsky, Barchester Way. So let me start with, I think you opened up with concerns about communications from the board. So let me just start off talking about how inconsiderate it was for you all to just, how inconsiderate it was for the board to just walk out on us when everyone's sitting, when the agenda and the communication directly said that the executive session was going to be after the comments. That was very inconsiderate of you. If you want to communicate better and let us know, please do better on your plans. So we're not sitting here, we're busy people, we have kids, we have things to do. Please communicate better. My next topic is on masks. When I spoke to you before in August, I said the executive order will end. Are you prepared to do what needs to be done or have a plan to do at that point? Obviously, you don't have a plan. Our neighboring towns have all announced the next day about lifting the mask mandate. What we received was a lukewarm email. Maybe it's going to happen. There's no metrics. If you had a plan, there would be metrics. Well, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. Obviously, no one prepared for the obvious occasion of the executive order lifting the mandate. So let me discuss about masks. Okay, masks are useless. We know this now, right? We know this now. Maybe if you wear a K95 properly, surgically, really tight, but kids don't do that. These are useless things. These are just little flaps of something. Children are a very low risk from COVID. We know this. That's the data. Okay? Constant wearing of masks for kids is harmful. I could do no better than that fifth grader that spoke. I don't even have to repeat that. She was right. These are harmful things. Okay? Additionally, and I mark my words, this hasn't brought up, but in 1 and 2 years, we're all going to hear how all these kids have lung damage from wearing these cheap masks that deteriorate. We breathe in, all these particles go in our lungs,
30 seconds.
developing lungs, and they're going to have permanent lung damage. Mark my words. So, okay, there's no benefit. There is a detriment. Okay, there is a detriment. Before this, you had an excuse. The government won't let us. Okay, now that's off. The government, on March 7th, there's no excuse.
Thank
And
you.
whatever damage you, let me finish. Whatever damage that you do to our children is on you. Okay?
Thank you.
So please stop. Please save our children.
Mona Nikolai, 124 Marlborough Street. Last week, Johns Hopkins Institute published a literature review and meta-analysis on the effects of lockdowns and COVID mortality. The study concluded that the lockdown reduced mortality with 0.2% in United States and Europe, which of course, it's not statistically significant. So, We sheltered in place, destroyed our economy, traumatized the whole population, arrested our children's development, created a pandemic of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse for nothing. Who will take responsibility for all this devastation? Not only that, but the study concluded that the other non-pharmaceutical interventions didn't significantly decrease mortality either. What are they talking about? They are talking about face masks, closing non-essential businesses, border closure, school closure, and limiting gatherings, distancing, not eating in the cafeteria, all those things. And you must think that this is a fringe study that only represents a minority. But that's not the case. I want to remind you, this is a meta-analysis. Many other studies show exactly the same thing. And as a result, United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Ireland, Finland, Vietnam, and some Canadian provinces stopped the isolation, stopped the masking, opened schools and businesses. The study shows that lockdowns
Excuse me for 1 second.
have never been in the history of humanity used to such large extent.
I paused your timer for 1 second, please.
Point of order.
Thank
Point
you.
of order. You'll get your
You
time.
guys,
Don't worry. Hold on.
I see 10 pizzas just came in. Keep your masks on. It's not an option. If you'd like to eat the pizza, you have to go outside. No.
This is a board meeting.
So you are interrupting my
I
my
paused
speech.
I paused your timer. I paused your timer.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay.
Yeah.
It's still, I was talking.
Okay, and there are still rules here. We can't eat pizza in the cafeteria.
It's exactly what I was saying before. You cannot eat pizza in the cafeteria. Thank you. The study shows that lockdowns have never been in the history of humanity used to such large extent. In conclusion, what the study shows is that all the non-pharmacological policies that you enforce do not work and have to be stopped immediately. Failure to do that make you guilty
30
of
seconds.
malfeasance. Remember that you took an oath. You are breaching your duty of care for my children and for all the other children. You will be put on notice. This is a crime of malfeasance that you will be liable for.
Thank you. Pause 1 second. Council? until every single person is wearing a mask.
There's a difference between taking a sip of water and eating pizza.
Oh, I'll make myself really loud. This is a board meeting. This is not a party. It's not a free-for-all we happen to be in a cafeteria. It doesn't mean that we're all having a party. Let's just continue with the meeting. Just put the pizzas away, put your mask back on. That's the mandate. That's all there is to it, so that we can allow the public to continue making their comments. We're not going to have out, you've always been able to have a sip of water. No one's ever stopped anyone from doing that. Okay, we're not having an open forum discussion. You're interrupting the speaker.
May I?
Yes, you may proceed.
Emily Barker, 434 Longfellow Avenue. As I was listening to the community discussion for an inclusive Westfield last week, I was struck by a chart that illustrated that 100% of the hate crimes that happened on school grounds in Westfield were anti-Semitic. 100%. Because of that reality, I've asked Dr. Pinero and Andrew Brennan to consider updating Westfield's social studies curriculum to include more exposure to the Holocaust in order to fight anti-Semitism. The fifth graders read Number the Stars as an introduction to the Holocaust, but after that, there's only sporadic mention in the social studies curriculum in 8th grade and then again in 11th grade. If we're truly looking for reasons for anti-Semitic acts, one might conclude it might have to do with the lack of knowledge of the atrocities this race of people have endured. The district's approach to teaching African American slavery is a thoughtful, multi-layered approach that touches multiple years at every school level. Given that example, I suggest the district consider using that template as a platform to educate our children about anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination, and I thank Dr. Pinero for revisiting this policy. Now, on a related note, during that community discussion, as Mr. George had said, the Jewish representative highlighted specific hate speech that is used against Jews. One of those hate speech phrases was tweeted by the vice president of the Westfield Board of Ed here this evening from her personal Twitter account the week prior to the community discussion. The phrase she tweeted was, "From the river to the sea." According to the American Jewish Committee, this phrase calls for the establishment of a state of Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, erasing the state of Israel and its people. It is essentially calling for genocide. According to the latest town stats, about 20% of Westfield is Jewish. So my question is, how can the district ensure an inclusive environment for Jewish students when the vice president of the Board of Education in their town puts out anti-Semitic hate speech? My last item is also related to inclusivity. Dr. G put out this email alluding to the removal of masks being attached to certain metrics. With all we now know about COVID, including the science saying that they can get and spread virus, vaxxed or not, we also know that some in the community have lingering feelings of fear, and many have the desire for freedom of choice. Governor Murphy is concerned about backlash on students who want to continue wearing masks. I am equally concerned about the ones who don't, the ones who are vaccinated for COVID and the ones that are not. Otherwise, school policies and curriculum need to be inclusive of all. Otherwise, our children will endure further anxiety as well as bullying. The policies coming down the pike should be about freedom of choice. No one's choices should be bullied, so please keep that in mind when you are making policy decisions.
Hello, Nick Leckner, 554 Highland Avenue. A few people have touched on metrics so far, and I'd really like to see some of those as we move forward. I think it'd be unrealistic to expect that COVID's not going to come back in waves. I'm hoping that you guys are going to realize that masks aren't really necessary, but then you might decide to take other precautions when certain waves hit. But the challenge that I see is it's never been defined to us, when we're going to hit, what thresholds we hit where you want to enact action, right? And what thresholds we get to on the reverse side where we get to take off the mask, we get to, go back to school, whatever it might be. It was a very tepidly optimistic email that you sent out that was not definitive by any means on what you were looking for regarding whether or not the masks are coming off on March 7th, right? Let's hear some definition, not just for March 7th, which I hope will very quickly come out with stronger optimism that they're coming off, but also, hey, we think that this will come in waves in the winter, and once we hit this regional threshold, this is going to be our action. Omicron hit. Everyone knew it was coming at some point. It hit, and I really felt like the district was caught off guard on how to react to it. I think we were lucky that it happened while everyone was away on vacation for the most part. But what if it had happened January 25th, right? What was the school's response going to be? And I would love to see metrics that you can provide and guidance that you can provide to all the members here that are very concerned about this laissez-faire, willy-nilly, here's how I'm waking up in the morning, I'm gonna decide what happens to our kids today, right? No one knows how you're defining success and how you're defining action for what's going to happen in the school year. So please provide that guidance. I think it would be very helpful. It'll definitely give everyone here a sense of security on what to expect, because we've been at it for 2 years and we've never been given that guidance, and it's frustrating. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Pittman, 264 Hazel Avenue. I have 2 kids in the Westfield schools. I actually came to the meeting. I live down the street after listening on YouTube. I just want to thank each and every one of you for the amazing job that you've done so far. Some of you have only been here a couple of months, some of you for years, the last 2 years. I think a lot of people are forgetting that this is a once-in-a-century global pandemic. And could you pause my time if they're gonna?
Yeah.
I'm here because there are a lot of people in this town that the views of the number of people that showed up here that could easily fit in a section of Trader Joe's do not represent the entire town, nor all of the parents. Most parents are tired, and we have kids, and we don't want to come to these meetings. They're boring. Sorry. Every once in a while on both sides, when there's an issue that a certain group of people feel strongly about, they rally the troops. This one is on a side that's for conspiracy theories. And there are a lot of people that don't. Now, do I like wearing a mask? No, I hate it. I wear glasses. So every time I walk into a room, from the outside, but I also know that these are not normal times. And I think, I just want to put that out there. And since I have a minute, I'm just going to take that minute because I'm so tired of listening to everyone else and the amount of disrespect that they've shown you. And I'm not going to get into the argument of why vaccines or masks work and how they work.
30 seconds.
Because I don't think, I honestly do, if people are here because they care about their children, great, that's what these meetings are for. But I think a lot of people are here because, for political reasons, and there are a lot of people and parents in this town that don't believe what these people are saying. Thank you.
Hi, Liz Mulholland, 1029 Harding Street.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Guys, please. Yeah. Yeah. A call for a recess. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? All right. We'll come back.
All right, I'm gonna go.
Right, no, I definitely sent them, for the reason that you just said, and I apologize, had I not known. So ideally, I'd love to do it with you from Congress to the computer. So right now, we have a new setup coming up for the microphone. So we're going to try and transition our setup to be more conducive to that. Yeah, no, definitely, because it was the same concept as that. There's two things that I sent. He said the 4:45 yesterday.
Yep, it's on.
Hello?
Yep.
All right. Oh, good, it works. It's still working? Okay, good. Hi, Liz Mulholland, 1029 Harding Street. I wanted to thank all of you for your tireless efforts in dealing with this horrific situation. I didn't actually come here to speak about the masks or any of the mandates. I came to speak about graduation testing that changed in the state. But I do have to say I'm a little disappointed with the animosity that I see here. As somebody who deals with the state at all times, I understand that the district has no choice but to follow state laws. So as much as you'd like to be cowboys and kind of override what the state tells you to do and what the state mandates are, I understand that it's a violation of the law and you would be censured and removed. And in the superintendent's case, he'd probably have his license revoked. So, and we would lose any state funding we have on top of that. So I do appreciate that while the rest of the public may not know that, you are so gracious when you are getting attacked for something that is not under your purview to deal with. I did see your letter today, which suggested, or at least I thought, that masks were going to be optional on the 7th. Very happy to hear that. I assume that that's what will happen. Anyway, I'm here because the state, as you know, controls everything. And as always, they throw snowballs at you guys and at the superintendent. And this is no different. The graduation requirements have changed. Now, this is going to be great. You're going to love this. So after 2 years of not taking a test, they created a brand new language arts test, a brand new graduation test. Brand new. Never been used before. It's going to combine Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry for math, and it's going to be given in 11th grade. So those kids will not have had Algebra 1 since 8th grade. Language arts, God only knows what they're putting in there. I think it's from 8th grade all the way up to 11th as well. Nobody knows anything about the metrics on this because, of course, it's a brand new test. And when we did Oprah, the data, the state of New Jersey refused to give us any metrics or information on this test.
30 seconds.
Sorry. So not only did they do that, they also said, well, nilly-willy, and I'm not kidding you when I tell you this, one senator said, you know, I think we should just raise the cut score and have less kids pass. They know that 32% overall passed, because that's what they set the cut score. They set the cut score in the last test for 32% to pass. So they're raising the cut score again, so we should expect a lot more kids will fail. And they're doing this knowing that for 2 years our kids haven't taken tests. So I wanted to bring your attention to that, and I'm sorry for taking up your time, but I thought it was really important for you to know. So thank you. Thank you again for all you do.
Thank you.
And for being so gracious.
Hi, good evening. Julie Steinberg, 109 Belmar Terrace. First, thank you for all your hard work, especially this evening. I want to talk a little bit about anti-Semitism and bullying. That's come up a few times this evening, and I've also spoken to you here and offline in some cases, and what we could do to fix it. Recently had a productive meeting with Dr. Gonzalez and several senior members of the team here, and some suggestions that I put forward that I'd like to be considered, including adding a half semester of Holocaust education at the high school level. Other towns like Scotch Plains and Summit offer this. It can be coordinated with Kane University or with Federation, and I think it would be an incredibly important step forward. We do not have anything equivalent to this in Westfield, as so many of our equivalent towns and neighboring towns do. And it would be incumbent upon us to consider this quickly, given the state of things and given several of the more recent events that have been highlighted in this and other meetings, both in the town as well as in the schools. I'd also suggest taking a look at the existing curriculum and determining if an audit is necessary of the previous Holocaust education, and perhaps adding a supervisor to oversee Holocaust education specifically, as it is an interdisciplinary educational process, and perhaps somebody more neutral can actually oversee it and ensure that it's being implemented properly, as well as act as a liaison on these matters. More importantly, so many of us have talked about the problem of anti-Semitism in our towns and schools, and how does it happen? How did the Holocaust happen? How did we get from the Weimar Republic to the Holocaust? And the answer is slowly. Norms were broken, and bullying occurred, and people broke the rules. And they weren't punished for breaking the rules, and appeasement happened. And then the people who broke the rules took power, and they made new norms, and things became worse and more dangerous. And that's how you get bullying and how authoritarianism happens. And it's happening here and elsewhere. And in a small way, we saw that happening tonight. And it doesn't matter whether it's false information or conspiracy theories or refusing to wear masks or ordering pizza. It's cute, but it's not funny. And when there's no consequences for that, it has to be noted. So next time, stop it. There have to be consequences when people break the rules. And the BOE tonight, next time, it shouldn't just be, hey, don't bring pizza here, put your masks on. It should be, you're going to be escorted out of this meeting if you can't follow the rules. This isn't kindergarten. We're all adults here. And if you can't comport yourself like adults, then you don't belong here. And honestly, I'm not surprised
Ma'am, please.
at all that these people have such childish mindsets because they themselves can't comport themselves as adults here. The toxic behavior is infectious, and the spread
Julie.
needs to stop. The BOE needs to inoculate our
Julie.
community by refusing to accept this behavior. If you're not wearing a mask and can't abide by the clear rules, you should be escorted out of the meeting, or the meeting should be ended.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Time.
My name is Andrea Taylor. I'm here tonight as a parent of a child in our schools, a neighbor, and to be transparent, a teacher in this district. I have listened to the board meetings and to the parent complaints over the past 2 years, and I'm saddened by what I hear. The divisiveness is painful. The anger is hurtful. 10 years ago, my son was diagnosed with leukemia, when he was in kindergarten, and he missed most of that year of school. 3 years ago, he relapsed. We were isolated. We wore masks before masks were a thing. He learned remotely before COVID made remote learning a thing. And we had so many emotions attached to those times. Anger, worry, fear, feelings of isolation, of not having control over our lives. Our lives were dictated by cancer. And then along came COVID. My son actually had the reaction when the schools went remote, finally, everybody will be like me. And I listen to the parents who speak out at the board meetings. I want you to know I hear you. I hear your anger at the circumstances in which we find ourselves. I hear your fear for your children. I hear your worry about them. I hear you. But tonight I need you to listen to me. The vitriol and the anger from parents at these board meetings, on social media, and in local papers has taken a heavy toll. Teaching methods have been attacked. Resilience has been tested. The ability to teach appropriately has been questioned. All of this has happened while staff have been expected to quickly and seamlessly jump from full days to half days to remote to hybrid and back again. We are not in normal times. We are all living in crisis. So I ask you, please stop, please. Enough lashing out, enough unleashing anger at each
30
other,
seconds.
towards the schools, this board, these teachers. It's hurtful, it's damaging, it's causing despair. Please use your energies to support each other, to the staff. Ask your teacher what you can do to help. Send a note of appreciation for a job well done. Do a kindness for someone in town. As my family has learned through our cancer journey, kindness and support help us through dark times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Zoe McKelvey, 320 Harrison Avenue in Westfield. Thank you for, it's been a long night, so I'll try to be quick. I just wanted to say that I wasn't able to attend the meeting last night at the Board of Health, and I actually served on the Board of Health, and I'm a little unclear about the role of the Board of Ed and the superintendent and everybody vis-a-vis the Board of Health in making the final decision of when to let go of the mask requirement once and for all locally. I would just urge the board to consider that the vaccination rate of kids shouldn't really be an important factor, in my opinion, because, you know, it's not necessarily going to go up. My own kids are vaccinated, but I believe in vaccine choice. And certain countries in Europe and Scandinavia, Sweden doesn't even recommend the vaccine, like officially. Of course, it's available, but to 5 to 11-year-olds. So I just think that I'd like to see some guidance quickly, sooner rather than later, by March 7th, on what the criteria will be. And I hope that we can be mass choice soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Dana Peterson, 151 North Euclid Avenue. Thank you, everybody, for staying. It's 10:26. Thank you for listening to the parents and their concerns, and thank you for being have open ears to what everyone has to say. I'm here to speak on behalf of my 4 children, my 9th grader who wears a mask all day in the high school, and also my other 3 children who are currently being homeschooled. One reason being that they were not given the option of mass choice. Mass choice is something I feel that should be an individual choice by each family and each child. Parents make the best choices for their children regarding both vaccines and masks. And yes, parents feel passionate because we have lost the choice, and now we're given that choice. Since Governor Murphy will be putting the decision on individual districts regarding masks, I am hopeful that you will listen to the parents of Westfield and advocate for mass choice for Westfield students, regardless of vaccination status. Voting for mass choice would not discriminate if you are in favor or if you are opposed to wearing them. It is the freedom to choose. Again, please do what's best for all students, which is mass choice. Thank you.
How you doing? Jeff Peterson, 151 North Euclid Avenue. I'm the father of 4 children. I know that you probably received many emails, both advocating for or against the mask. Since the governor's lifting the mandatory masks in school, now it's time for all you guys to decide what's best for our Westfield students. The logical solution is freedom, mass choice. So the students and parents here can be free to decide what's for them, what's best for them. I thank you in advance for choosing what is right for our kids. Mass choice, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm a little short. My name's Debbie Goldberg. I'm at 123 Green Place in Westfield. I don't have anything written out, but I do want to talk, and it gets me emotional, about all of our kids for mask choice, but especially those with 504s and IEPs that, have really hard time concentrating as it is. When you have a kid wearing a mask, they have attention difficulties. And of course, by the end of the day, they're gonna put their hood up and zone out. It's very hard for a teacher to tell, other than the eye contact, if the kid is paying attention. I feel that I worry for these kids, especially my own child, and let me back up by saying I have a 3rd grader and then a little one who is not in elementary school yet. I fear that my child will fall behind because he's wearing a mask and he cannot communicate, he cannot see facial expressions and communication. He cried to me before coming tonight, and he said, "Mom, I beg you to please fight for me to not wear a mask anymore. I want to see my friends smile. I want to talk to my friends without having the mask covering the faces." It's very hard for these kids that have attention difficulties as it is and have gotten diagnoses during COVID for them to be able to concentrate and for the teachers to be able to see if they're concentrating or not. I feel that with the masks on, it really prevents them from being able to advance and, like I said, not fall behind, and really being able to communicate effectively how they feel with the teachers. I feel that I've seen, especially during the part of COVID that was hybrid, a lot of these kids with other attention issues or in general that were falling behind. Our kids are, regardless if they are top of the grade students or middle, they've been falling behind. So I also beg you, I know the masks and the vaccines are separate issues. Please do not discriminate against these kids, because whether it's a medical choice or just freedom in general, this vaccine is not even FDA approved. I beg you to not discriminate against those kids that are not vaccinated and already have, certain learning disabilities as well. We need to be able to have mask choice and let our kids learn and play freely with their friends. Thank you very much, and I hope you listen to everyone tonight.
Hi, good evening. Christine Binder, 404 West Dudley Ave. Okay, so this has definitely taken a different turn than the last 18 months. 18 months we've been coming, we show data, we've been begging you just to listen. We know that the state, that you can only do what you can do. But I don't think any of us have really seen people try to put policies in place to try to counteract. We see other districts doing it. I sent Brendan, board president, a letter, and all of you 2 weeks ago, asking, have you put any policies in place? Because we suspected that this would be coming down the line. I get a generic email back. Then I email again. Can we meet with you? Can you answer my very specific 3 questions? No answer. So when people make comments like, oh, we're coming up here like cowboys, I think most people are very respectful. We are just beyond frustrated. How do you hear these stories about these kids and just like it's like a blank stare? Okay, they talked and we're gone. This is so heartbreaking. And now what's coming down the pike is, and I have to say, it makes me nervous. We get this announcement from Governor Murphy. My son's so excited, and I'm looking at him, and I say to my husband, don't get too excited, because now the discrimination is going to start. And you know what? Last night at that Board of Health meeting, they started laying the groundwork. We see it coming from a mile away. Now they're saying things like, oh, well, we have to talk about the vaccination status to make sure it goes up, especially for unmasking. So what does that mean? Then Dr. Budnick says, everyone's talking about unmasking, but we have to protect all of our community. We know what that means. We know what that means. I'm not going to be that parent, okay, that gives my kid an experimental vaccine that the same way we know that masks don't work now, that some people didn't know 2 years ago. I knew they never worked. 2 years from now, when kids start having issues from this vaccination, then what are you going to do? Oh, it's not going to be so easy to just take a mask off. I'm not going to be that parent that tests kids to come to a party. Oh, you can only come to the party if you have a vaccine. I'm never going to be that person.
30 seconds.
And I would hope that you would not discriminate. You have these diverse meetings, right? And I am all for diversity. Why is it different? For what, the unvaccinated to not a protected class? That's not socially correct to talk about? I really hope that you do not segregate these children, because that's exactly what it would be. It would be segregation.
Thank you.
Hello, Justin Lubino, 19 Cornwall Drive.
I have 2 children at Washington School. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. It's been very difficult. My 7-year-old has never really been in school yet with real school. I mean, whether it's been remote or trying to learn through the mask and breathe through the mask, and it's, as Christine just mentioned, it's been extremely frustrating. In August, I came out to speak at the board meeting. It was in the other building, and one of the things I mentioned then was the mandate is going to be lifted. We all knew that in August. We just didn't know when. And what I had asked the board was to have a proactive plan, so we're not just going to cross that bridge when we get to it. Yet today, we get an email stating we're going to cross the bridge now that we've gotten to it, right? We're not ready yet. We need another 4 weeks. We don't want to rush anything. It's not rushed. This has been 2 years. It's just extremely frustrating that we're still sitting here. There's 46 districts so far that have already announced mass choice, and we're sitting here. I'm going to use some of my time to read these. Absecon, Ramsey, Fairlawn, Franklin Lakes, Oakland, Wyckoff Township, Ramapo, Indian Hills Regional, Northvale, Old Tappan, Harrington Park, Westwood, Pascack Valley Regional, Rivervale, Park Ridge, Cresskill, Dumont, Bordentown Regional, Evesham Township, Black Horse Pike Regional, Nutley, Caldwell West, Cedar Grove Township, Bayonne, East Brunswick, Middletown, Manalapan English Town Regional, Hazlet Township, Marlboro, Upper Freehold Regional, Colts Neck Township, East Hanover Township, School District of the Chathams, West Morris Regional, Pequannock Township, Washington Township, Long Hill Township, Southern Regional, Brick Township, North Haledon, West Milford Township, Wayne, Pennsville, Scotch Plains, Fanwood, Clark Township, New Providence, which, by the way, as I understand it, works with the same Board of Health that we work with, have announced mass choice, yet we're still waiting guidance from the Department of Health. And New Providence, and Cranford. It was announced earlier today as well. So do we want to be a leader? Does Westfield want to be a leader? Because it doesn't appear that we do. There's 46 towns out there that have announced already, and we're still waiting on some sort of guidance. So I hope you take that into consideration and move quickly on this. As everyone has pointed out, this is just, it's not good for our children. So thank you.
Darren Composto, 929 Westfield Avenue. Strongly support mass choice. I'm choosing to take the most generous read of Dr. Gonzalez's email, and I believe come March 7th that our kids will be unmasked, and I genuinely hope that's the case. And I think all of his actions have been pretty good in trying to keep things as open and normal as possible since he's been here. I think he's done a very good job. Putting all the division aside, I just wanted to ask the entire room to recognize probably the guy who's had the hardest job here tonight, and that's Officer Riga, who has had to keep the order. Thank you very much. That was it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
How you guys doing tonight? Ash Nongia, 526 Hillcrest, Westfield. So I think, you guys have kind of heard a lot of noise tonight. We need to take care of this mask business, make them optional. Let's get them out of here. Let's not tie anything up with vaccination status. My son got sent home from school on one occasion due to a close contact in the cafeteria. His buddies didn't have to go home because they were vaccinated. You've heard it over and over. I don't need to run through it again. And you can, if you watch the news, if you pay attention, Walensky at CDC has already told you the virus spreads whether you're vaccinated or not. Dr. Fauci has said vaccinated, unvaccinated have the same viral load in the nose. There's really no basis at all at this point to separate or send home certain kids because of their vaccination status. I think that we need to get these masks taken care of very quickly. For those of you who don't know or don't pay attention, you should know that the infection survival rate of children 0 to 19 is 99.9973. Doesn't really get any more safe than that. It's a statistically zero chance of death for children at that age. And so if we're talking about protecting adults from the children, look at age 20 to 29, 99.986. 30 to 39, 99.969. 40 to 49, 99.918. 50 to 59, 99.73. What are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, really, you guys don't like wearing the mask. Look at all of you up here. Look at all of us. Look at me. This is like a dystopian nightmare. This is crazy. What is going on around here? You know? And I really just can't understand it anymore. It's just crazy. Who are we protecting? We're hurting the children's education. We're hurting their daily happiness, their lives. It just makes no sense. I can't even wrap my head around it anymore. And I don't understand how you guys can. You know? You guys have hid behind this thing with the state. It's Murphy, it's the state. We can't do anything. We took an oath. Oh my God, we got to uphold this. But you know what? You could push back once in a while. Turn up the heat on the state. Other people have done it. Other districts have done it. Tom's River's done it. I read the stuff in the news. You know, they push back, but we never push back. You know why? Because Westfield follows. We don't lead. Even now, after Murphy lifts the mandate, you guys are waiting for state guidance. You never shoot the ball. You just pass. But Cranford does, and Fanwood does, and Scotch Plains does, but Westfield doesn't. Supposedly the best of the best.
Thank you.
Right? But you know what? We follow here. So now follow. That's all you guys ever do. Follow Murphy.
Thank you.
Let's shut it down. And I'll just say this right
No,
here at the end.
time's up.
Huh? No, I'm going to say it anyways. You can throw me out, but I want to say this anyways.
All right.
I've been litigating for 20 years. All
Your
right?
time
I'm a
is up.
lawyer. I got lawyer friends back here, and I'm going to tell you right now that if
Your
the
time
stuff
is up.
doesn't stop, we're going to put
Motion
this
to
stuff
adjourn?
together, and we're going to shut it
Second.
down ourselves.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Yeah. What? Yeah. Okay.